Story number 1, The Whisper in the Forest. You're 13, lost in the deep forests of a French summer camp, the trees closing in as you hide. A whisper slithers through the leaves, soft but chilling. Stay here. I was around 13 or 12 years old. You freeze, heart pounding, scanning the shadows, but nothing moves, yet you feel eyes on you. I've always been a big childish person, partly because of a car accident when I entered medium school that felt like it stopped my growth mentally. The air grows heavy, the forest too quiet. As the whisper returns closer, urging you to follow, I barely had any friends because I was going through the whole weird looks bullying thing. You run, branches snapping, but the voice follows, its tone shifting, now familiar, now wrong. And the only ones that were okay to hang out with me were younger people or the people with the same mindset I had. You're not alone in these woods, and whatever's out there knows your name. Every year, my parents would send me to a summer camp lost in the mountains where there were basically mountain activities like hiking, exploring forests, and all of that. The forest is alive, and it's watching you. For reference, I live in France, and I don't know how summer camps elsewhere work, but here it's basically an age classification. You're a shy, childish 13-year-old, shaped by a car accident that left you feeling younger than your peers. There were 3 groups: blue, youngest; yellow, medium; and green, elder. Summer camp in the French mountains is your escape, but this year feels different. I was supposed to go into the yellow group because I was still too young, but for some reason, I got bumped to the green group composed of people that were 16 and everyone hated me for being so young and childish. You're placed with older teens who mock your enthusiasm, leaving you isolated. A day I remember was one of the last. The instructors, cheerful but distant, lead your group to a forest clearing for a picnic, proposing a game of hide and seek. The instructors that were keeping an eye on us brought us to the deepest spot of the forest to have a picnic. The older kids scoff, too cool to play, but you're thrilled, sprinting into the woods as the counting begins. And after that, they looked after us and asked us if we wanted to play hide and seek. You leap over a small river, weave in through trees, seeking the perfect hiding spot, your heart light with excitement. Everyone was probably too old for that, but they were still setting things up, to which most refused to even hide. But the forest feels different, too quiet, too still, as if it's holding its breath. The whisper knows you, and it won't let go. I was a kid, of course, and was overexcited when they started counting, and I ran as fast as I could to a place super far away so they wouldn't find me. You crouch behind a tree, giggling, but the silence deepens, unnatural. There was a smallish river. A whisper cuts through, softed and low. Stay here. You freeze, scanning the shadows, but see nothing, only feeling a weight, like eyes boring into you. I jumped over it, and after some steps, I started to scream at the top of my lungs. You bolt upright, heart racing, shouting for your group, but your voice echoes unanswered. The whisper returns, closer. Now a voice you know, your friend from camp, but twisted, wrong. You sprint, branches clawing at you, the river a blur as you leap back over it. I turned back and made the mad sprint of my life. The voice follows, shifting, calling your name, urging you deeper into the woods. You find your friend, her face confused, claiming she saw nothing, heard nothing. I found my one only friend in the whole camp. You cling to her, too scared to tell the instructors, fearing they won't believe you. I went to the instructors, but was too terrified to do anything or even tell them. That night, you lie awake, the whisper echoing in your mind, wondering if it was someone from camp or something else. So, I didn't. You leave on the bus, haunted. The forest voice a scar you carry. I caught my parents, but they couldn't come to collect me. You don't know what it was, but it knew you. And it's still out there, waiting. The forest keeps its secrets, and so do you. I had to go back home on the bus like everyone else. You're older now, far from those mountains, but the whisper lingers, a chill in quiet moments. What terrified me the most was that the guy could be one of the people in the same group as me. You avoid forests. Their silence too heavy, their shadows too alive. For all I know, he could just hit me in my sleep and take me somewhere. You dream of the river, the trees, the voice that knew your name. I still don't know who that guy is and never want to know. You tell a friend, expecting doubt. But they share stories of French camps, whispers in the woods, no explanations. You search online, finding forums, campers, hikers, hearing voices in those mountains, calling, luring. A local guide mentions old tales, spirits tied to the land, drawn to the lost. You post your story, connecting with others who felt the same pull, the same fear. You write a blog, warning of forests that speak, your words a shield. You live in a city now, lights always on, but you check windows, avoid dark paths. The whisperer didn't follow, but its echo stays, a shiver you can't shake, waiting for the next forest to call. Story number 2, The Shaking Asylum. The abandoned asylum loomed in the Ohio woods, its walls whispering secrets of forgotten minds. I ventured in alone, drawn by the thrill of the unknown, my flashlight cutting through the dark. Patient cards littered the floor, and cryptic notes hinted at a hostage's release. Then the building shook, a violent tremor that sealed me inside. This is the story of the night the asylum came alive, and the mystery that vanished with it. The forest path was a maze of shadows, leading to a crumbling lot where 2 buildings stood. I'd come unprepared, fueled by curiosity, ignoring the risks of trespassing alone. The air was thick, the silence heavy, as if the place knew I was coming. My footsteps echoed on rusted stairs, each step a dare to whatever lingered within. Something was here, and it wasn't just the ghosts of the past, it was awake. I'm not particularly religious, nor do I necessarily believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but that night defied logic. A friend tells me about an abandoned building her friend showed her. I couldn't wait. I wanted to go that night, whereas she could not. No one else would join me. I asked a few other friends to make the journey with me, and all declined. I went alone, reckless. I decided to go alone. The building was a relic. Its roof caved in, but its bones held firm. I arrive about a mile from the location and start my journey. I chose the left building. Its stairs treacherous. I find some metal stairs that have been overgrown and look like they're close to collapsing. They held, and I entered. I climb the stairs just fine and go to the second floor. Cards, scattered everywhere revealed its past. A psychiatric office. There are note cards all over the floor with basic information on people. I sifted through patient records. Intrigued, I have a seat and looked through some of the patient cards. A children's room held a sandbox with a pentagram drawn in it. It has a sandbox and some toys lying around, but someone had taken their time to use the sand to draw a pentagram. I descended to the first floor, finding odd notes. On the desk in this office is a set of Post-it notes. They spoke of a hostage, timed releases. On these notes are messages that make me feel a little uneasy. The building roared to life, shaking violently. The entire building begins to shake violently. I thought earthquake, but no news confirmed it. My first thought was earthquake. Doors I'd opened were now shut tight. Every door I had opened upstairs was now closed tight. The exit was sealed, trapping me inside. The door I came in through was shut. I pulled on it, but nothing. I kicked out a window, desperate to escape. I kicked the door down. Guess I'm kicking out the press board covering the window next to it. The shaking stopped as I fled. As soon as my feet hit the ground on the last step, the building stopped shaking completely. Silence swallowed the night, as if nothing had happened. Everything around me was silent. I never returned alone. Every other time I've been there, nothing out of the ordinary has happened. The buildings are gone now, erased without a trace. The buildings from these stories were now demolished. And I must keep. Story number 3, The Driver's Last Grip. The night was black, the kind that swallows light. Our wrecker's engine roared as we sped down a lonely road. The call crackling through the radio. A truck had crashed, miles from town, into a tree that wouldn't budge. My stomach knotted. The dark pressing in, the silence between me and Dad, heavy with what we might find. We reached the scene, the truck's headlights cutting through the gloom, its engine idling like a dying breath. The cab was crumpled, the windshield a jagged hole. The trailer skewed against an ancient oak. No driver, no sound, just the hum of the truck and a chill that wasn't from the cold. Dad worked the wrecker, his flashlight dancing over the wreckage, but I felt it. Something wrong. Something waiting. The cab door was shut, the window empty, but the air was thick. Like the night itself was holding its breath, hiding a truth too heavy to face. I approached the cab, my boots crunching gravel, my heart a drum in my chest. The door creaked under my hand, and the darkness inside was alive, a secret the truck kept. I opened it, and the world stopped, a sight no kid should see, a horror that would never leave. This wasn't just a crash, it was a slaughter. A moment frozen in blood and steel, a man's life torn apart by chance, by physics, by a load that turned traitor. The truck, the tree, the night, they were witnesses. And now I was too, marked by what I'd found. This happened to me when I was 15. My dad ran a wrecker service for over-the-road truckers. The garage was our life. It's grease and grit and our blood. Late one night, we got a call that a truck had run off the road and struck a tree 20 meters south of town. So, my dad and I fired up the wrecker and headed south. The road was dark, the stars hidden, the only light our headlights slicing through the night. When we came onto the scene, the truck and the trailer had run off the road to the right, and smacked a tree head-on. It was one of those 100-year-old oak trees. The truck was a cab-over, engine beneath, no nose to cushion the blow. The truck was still running at an idle. The door was closed, but no driver was seen from the driver's window. The front driver's windshield was busted and there was a large hole in the middle. The trailer was loaded with flat 4-inch steel sheets. Of course, it's pitch black, and we couldn't really see things that well when we first got there. Our impression was that the driver smacked a tree, hit his head on the windshield, and was already getting treatment somewhere else. We assumed he'd been taken away. The scene abandoned. So my dad set up the wrecker to hook on the trailer, and he wanted me to open the cab in order to release the brakes. I climbed up, my flashlight weak, the cab looming like a tomb. When I opened the door, I was greeted with the sight of the lower half of a body. My breath stopped, my light shaking, revealing the horror, legs, torso, severed clean, blood pooling in the seat. The cab was a slaughterhouse, the air thick with death. I stumbled back, my scream silent, my eyes burning with what I'd seen. The night wasn't empty anymore, it was full, too full, with a truth that would haunt me, a man's life cut in two. The rest came in flashes. I called to Dad, my voice cracking, his face paling as he saw the steel sheet, loose from the crash, had turned blade, slicing through the cab, through the driver. When the driver hit the tree, a single sheet of steel broke free and cut through the cab, cutting the driver in half. The upper half of his body went through the windshield. I followed the trail, my flashlight trembling, into the cornfield beyond. I found the rest of him about 40 foot from the truck in a cornfield, and he was still grabbing the upper part of the steering wheel. It looked like he was frozen in time, still driving the truck. His hands were tight, his face locked in a grimace, as if he'd driven into death itself. Needless to say, he went into a body bag with his lower half, and we worked through the night, getting the truck and trailer back to town. The police came, their lights harsh, their voices low. We towed the wreck, steel still jutting from the cab, the oak unmoved, a witness to the carnage. This is one of my many experiences having grown up in a wrecker service family. The night ended, but the image didn't. His hands, his face, the blood, a scar I'd carry, a lesson in how fast life could break. The weeks after were quiet, but not peaceful. I didn't sleep, not really. The cab's interior flashing in my dreams. Dad didn't talk about it, his jaw tight, his work relentless. We kept towing, kept answering calls, but each crash was an echo of that night, each truck a ghost. I started checking the cabs myself, needing to know, needing to face the dark. The town moved on, the oak stood tall, but I didn't. I was 15, and I'd seen death, held it in my light, carried it home. I looked up crashes later, the physics of steel, the fragility of cabs. There were others, drivers lost to loads, to trees, to chance. Each story was a weight, a reminder of the man in the cornfield, his grip on the wheel, his life gone in a second. I kept a piece of that night, a shard of glass from the windshield tucked in a drawer, a reminder to stay sharp, to never forget. Story number 4, the taxi trap. I work a long commute away from home and depend on the train. The rails were my lifeline, a thread connecting my world to the city. But when the trains failed, that thread snapped, leaving me stranded in a sea of strangers. There were some issues that caused the trains to be canceled for hours, which left me stranded about an hour and a half away from home. The station was a limbo, cold and unforgiving, its platform a stage for desperation. I stood among the crowd, my breath visible in the chill, my home a distant dream. The night was closing in, and I was alone, unaware of the trap, waiting. The taxi was a solution, but solutions can hide dangers. The strangers were my only option. At the train station, there were a few others who were all heading to my city, and we decided to split a taxi. The decision was quick. Born of necessity, not trust, the group was a patchwork of lives, each face a story I didn't know. The people were woman one, Lisa, heading to my city to see a girl. Lisa was a spark, willed and untamed, her laughter loud but brittle. She was a bit wild. Her energy was infectious, but it masked something fragile. A guy called Kyle traveling with Lisa. Kyle was her shadow, his steps unsteady, his eyes clouded by liquor. They're not dating, but their conversation seemed to make out that they were very good friends. Their banter was intimate, a dance of secrets I wasn't meant to hear. He was beyond drunk. His drunkenness was a weight, his words a warning. Kyle's chaos set the tone. It made me a bit uncomfortable because he was flirting in a bush and kept making vulgar comments about Lisa's hot cousin. His voice was slurred, his comments crude, each one a jab at my nerves. The station's hum faded, replaced by his laughter, too loud, too raw. I shifted, my bag a shield, my eyes scanning for escape. The group was my only way home, but Kyle's presence was a crack in that plan. I wanted to flee, but the night held me, its cold a chain. The taxi was coming, and I was committed. My choice, a gamble. John was a darker threat than this other dude. John invited and he was traveling alone and mentioned that he lived in my city. John was quiet, his face unreadable, his presence a shadow, just moved there, but was in the town we were leaving from as he just broke up with his girlfriend and was picking up stuff from her place. His story was simple, but his eyes told another tale. He stood apart, his silence heavy, his gaze too sharp. Another woman was meant to join us, but she chose to stay behind, a decision that echoed in my mind. This other woman decided to stay at her mother's house in the town for another evening, so drops out of the taxi ride. Her absence was a warning, a chance I didn't take. That should have been my cue to also drop out. But they had just rung the taxi, and I didn't want to ruin it as they already calculated how much we each needed to pay. Guilt held me, my politeness a trap. The taxi arrived, its lights a false promise of safety. I decided to ask Lisa if she could sit next to me, and she said she understood completely and said that she would sit in the middle. Lisa's agreement was a lifeline, her presence a shield. I clung to her promise, my fear a quiet thing. The taxi's interior was dim, its seats worn, its air thick with tension. I stepped in, my heart racing, the night pressing against the windows. The journey was set, but the real danger was inside, waiting to unfold. The seating was a betrayal. So, the seating arrangement was drunk. Kyle sat at the front, me on one side, Lisa in the middle, and John as well. Kyle's slurred voice filled the front, a distraction from the rear. Lisa was my buffer, her warmth a comfort against the cold. Mind from where we were parked, there was no danger to getting in from the other side as there were no oncoming cars. The street was empty. The taxi a lone island in the dark. He opened the door on my side and just stared at me. John's stare was a blade cutting through my resolve. His eyes were empty, his silence a threat. Then Lisa says cheerfully for me to sit on the other side as she wanted the middle seat to talk to Kyle more easily. Her cheer was a lie, her change a wound. John stared at us for a second time, then smiled and slowly walked over to the other side and got in. His smile was wrong, a predator's grin, slow and deliberate. The taxi moved, but I was trapped. My seat, a prison. The ride was a battlefield. The ride itself was awkward, as Lisa and Kyle were both drunk and dirty laundry was aired. Their voices clashed, secrets spilling like blood. That's how I gathered that they were sleeping together. Their intimacy was raw, a confession I didn't want. The taxi's hum was drowned by their laughter, their fights, their truths. I shrank into my seat, my hands clutching my bag, my eyes fixed on the window. The night outside was safer than the chaos within. Lisa was drinking still, before she finally said she needed to go to the toilet and was desperate. Her plea was a break, a chance to breathe. The taxi man found a public leisure center for him to pull into. She got out and went inside. Lisa's absence was a void, the taxi colder without her. John's touch was a violation. Mistake number 2, I should have gone with her. Regret was a weight, crushing my chest. I stayed, frozen by the cold, by my own hesitation I just didn't think about it. The moment passed, my chance lost. Normally, I go with female friends in restaurants or bars, but because it was in a taxi and freezing outside, I just stayed. The cold was an excuse, my fear a chain. Kyle and John went out to smoke a cigarette. Their absence was a relief, but brief. Then John came back when he saw Lisa coming out. His return was swift, his eyes locking on me. He scooted over to the middle and put his hand on my upper thigh and rested it there. His touch was a shock, a violation too close to my cork. Regret number 3, I should have said something and made a scene, but I just froze completely. Fear was a cage locking my voice, my body. The taxi's hum was a distant roar, the world narrowing to his hand. Lisa was my savior. Lisa opened the door, looked at John, looked at me, then looked at John's hand on my thigh, about 2 inches away from my lady parts. Her gaze was a lifeline, seeing what I couldn't say. She cheerfully said to him, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Can we switch places? I love sitting in the middle." Her cheer was a weapon, her words a shield. John looked pissed off. His anger was a crack in his mask, raw and ugly. He looked over at me, who was still frozen, removed his hand from my thigh, and scooted out to make room for her. His retreat was reluctant, his eyes burning. He grumbled something I couldn't hear before Lisa said, "Thank you," and came in next to me. Lisa's presence was a wall, her warmth a rescue. John sat in his allocated seat this time and we took off. The taxi moved, but the threat lingered. John's silence a storm. Lisa's protection held. Lisa then took my hand and whispered, "Woman to woman, I'll make sure you get home safe." Her whisper was a vow, her hand a lifeline. I was just tearing up and said, "Thank you." Tears were my release, my fears spilling over. Lisa's grip was steady, her mission clear. Throughout the journey, about 4 to 5 times after Lisa had leaned forward to talk to Kyle, John slipped his hand to her seat, so when she would sit back down, he would touch her arm. His touch was a predator's game, testing her boundaries. Every time she just giggled and said, "Oh, sorry, I think I sat on your hand." Her giggle was a mask, her words a deflection. I felt awful because she was in this position because of me. Guilt was a chain binding me to her sacrifice. So I apologized, and she just repeated that she'll get me home safely. Her resolve was iron, her drunkenness no barrier. She was very drunk at this point from the extra taxi drinking. Her mission was her anchor, her focus unwavering. John's insistence grew. When we got close to the city center, Lisa asked me where I needed to get to, and I told her the general area. Her question was a shield, her voice a guide. John said he moved into an area that is literally in the opposite direction. His claim was a lie. His suburb too far. His suburb is north, and I'm south of the city center. The city split us, our paths diverging. He said after Kyle and Lisa got out that we would share a taxi, despite that making no sense as we lived in completely different directions from each other. His insistence was a threat, a plan I couldn't accept. I said, "No, that's fine," but he was insistent and wouldn't take no for an answer. His voice was a wall, unyielding. His eyes a demand. The taxi's hum was a countdown. The city lights a distant hope. I was trapped. His words a rope tightening around me. I called for help. Lisa was too drunk and crying about how much she loves her dog at this point to protect me. Her tears were a distraction, her shield faltering. I was alone. John's presence a weight. So I texted my husband that I was terrified and if he could walk up to come get me. The text was a cry. My phone a lifeline. My husband's reply was swift, his promise a beacon. My husband booked it over there as fast as he could. His speed was my salvation, his presence a shield. The taxi slowed, the city center nearing, but John's gaze didn't waver. I gripped my phone, my heart racing, the night a predator waiting. I escaped, but not unscathed. After we got out the taxi, John was getting his bags out the trunk, and I said bye to Lisa and just ran as fast as I could to make it to my husband. My legs were wings, my fear fuel. Lisa's goodbye was a whisper, her face blurred by my tears. My husband's arms were safety, his voice a balm. The city swallowed John, his shadow fading, but not his mark. I ran, the pavement cold, the night a blur, my home a distant light. The taxi was gone, but its memory was a scar, raw and open. We must stand together. We say, girls, we need to stick together more. The lesson was hard won, a truth carved in fear. I should have gone with her to the toilet. Regret was a wound, bleeding with every step. Lisa's protection was a gift. Her drunken resolve, a shield I didn't deserve. I should have stood with her, our bond a strength. The night taught me, its lesson cruel but clear. The city was mine again, but I was changed, my trust bruised. The taxi was a trap, but we escaped. Our sisterhood, a light in the dark. Don't stay alone. Don't trust the quiet. Story number 5. The strangers at Subway. The Walmart was a safe haven. Until it wasn't. My name's Ellie. A kid too young to know the world's sharp edges, I had gone to a local Walmart with my grandpa to pick up groceries. The aisles buzzed with normalcy, but danger lurked closer than I knew. While my grandpa was checking out, I craved something quick, my stomach growling. I asked him if I could go to the subway attached to the Walmart to buy a sub. Grandpa's smile was my shield, but it couldn't protect me from what waited. His trust was my undoing. My grandpa, being the loving man he was, wanted me to be happy. So he handed me cash, gave me some money, and told me I could order myself. The subway was a stone's throw away, a safe bet in our quiet town. The subway entrance was maybe 20 feet from where my grandpa was standing. He could see me, or so we thought. We lived in a very small and relatively safe town. That safety was a lie, one we believed too easily. The walk was short, but the air shifted. I quickly walked the short distance to Subway. I dreamed of my sub, piling on toppings, unaware of the eyes on me. Thinking of all the stuff I was going to pile on top of my sub. The counter was a barrier, but not enough. I got up to the counter and noticed immediately that the only other people in the subway were three middle-aged men talking. Their voices were low, their presence heavy. I ignored them at first, not thinking anything could be wrong. The men were wolves in plain sight. After all, in my little kid brain, I had no reason to think strangers would be interested in me. My parents' warnings echoed faintly. A distant alarm. My parents had given me stranger danger talks. I ordered. The cashier's indifference a cold comfort. I ordered the sub with no problem and paid my money. She vanished, leaving me alone. The cashier was very uninterested in me. The men closed in, their smiles sharp. I stood there alone for a moment, collecting my change. Their words were a trap, and I was the prey. I didn't notice the men until all three of them were standing right behind me. My heart sank, dread coiling in my gut. When I turned around, they caught me off guard. Their grins were wrong, predatory. They were all smiling at me in a creepy way. One spoke, his accent thick, his voice a serum. One of the men spoke up and in a thick accent said, "You are very beautiful. What is your name?" I lied, my instincts kicking in. I said, "My name's Ashley." The lie was my shield, but it wavered. This is not my real name. Their smiles grew, their eyes hungry. The other two men were standing behind him and just creepily smiling and staring at me. The leader pressed, his words a lure. The same man that spoke the first time said, "Ah, Ashley, what a beautiful name. Do you want to come with us and have some fun?" Panic surged, my eyes darting for Grandpa. I started desperately looking around for my grandpa. He was there, oblivious, too far. I noticed him still standing at the checkout line. I ran, and the world blurred. The man took a step toward me. My legs moved before my mind could catch up. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I didn't look back. Fear driving me. I ran faster than I ever have before and straight to my grandpa and never looked behind me. I reached him, safe but shaken. When I got to my grandpa, he was finishing up paying for the groceries. His stern look faded when I spoke. I told my grandpa what happened. Grandpa's fury was a storm. He was furious. He wanted to hunt them, protect me. He wanted to go back and report the men. We left, the store a memory of terror. We left the store safely and quickly. At home, the truth settled heavy and cold. I searched X years later, finding tales of strangers in small towns, of kids who didn't run. My lie, my speed saved me. I don't trust crowds now. Always watch the edges. Some strangers see you, and they don't forget. Story number 6, The Haunted Haven. The house stood like a sentinel at the edge of the forest, its pristine walls hiding a restless spirit. When I started working my last job, it was for people who had assisted living homes beautifully built to accommodate the elderly. The place was a marvel, all polished wood and soft light, designed for comfort. Days before starting work at a newly built house, the company owner had me take some things over there one evening. The task was simple, a prelude to my new role. It was autumn and growing dark earlier, with nighttime closing in pitch black where there were no lighted areas. The darkness was thick, the forest a looming presence. It was an area where new homes were being built near surrounding woods with very few streetlights. The air was heavy, charged with an unseen weight. Upon entering the new house, I went to find the place and was told to put the stuff down. The rooms were pristine, their newness a stark contrast to the unease I felt. I walked around admiring the beautiful new rooms and furniture. The furniture gleamed, but the house felt cold, unwelcoming. Although something seemed off, I knew that I was fortunate to be getting the full-time position on my preferred shift working in this beautiful new house. The job was a gift, but the house was a riddle. Although I was satisfied, something in the atmosphere seemed very off. The feeling was intangible, a whisper of wrongness. It wasn't the expectant feeling of being a bit nervous working with different people, with most of whom I'd never met, or the feeling of emptiness of a place or property having been never occupied. It wasn't new job jitters or the quiet of an empty house. The entire area where the homes were being built just felt off. The land itself seemed to resist us, its woods watchful. Business at the new house began as it slowly filled with residents, and more than enough work for one or two of them alone. The residents brought life, but the unease lingered. Strange vibes from the house still were going strong. The house began to speak, its voice unsettling. It wasn't until several months later that workers began to mention strange experiences they had. The stories were hushed, shared in quiet corners. This didn't happen until some residents had passed away in the home, but I did not consider that as being the reason for the strange events. The deaths were natural, yet the events were not entirely. The house seemed to hold secrets beyond mortality. Anyway, the first weird thing that I heard was that a sea orca was telling me that she felt as though she was being smothered as she sat near a resident's bedside working the midnight shift. The sensation was a shock, a violation of the night. She described a weight on her chest, a presence without formality. I will always remember the time that I was taking a break and making popcorn in the microwave. The kitchen was a sanctuary, its normalcy a comfort. Some had burnt, fearing it would smell up the house. I took it to the garage that was conveniently attached to it. The burnt smell was sharp, a mistake I aimed to hide. When I came back inside the house, the entire kitchen reeked with the scent of air freshener. The scent was a mystery, floral and alien. There were plug-in air fresheners in other rooms of the house, but none in the kitchen at the time. The fragrance was a ghost, sourceless and strong. The strong scent I was smelling was nothing like the other air fresheners, and they were not even the type that have the automatic sprays. It was unique, untraceable. I checked all over the house for any air freshener spray cans or cleaners that may have been a cause for the scent, but found nothing. The search was futile. The house silent. All cleaners were in the garage, and the residents were all sitting quietly in the living room. The residents were calm, oblivious to the anomaly. Some incidents that were told to me were from 2 co-workers that experienced lights turning on and off without them touching them. The lights were a puzzle, their actions unexplained. One worker said that she had turned out the main light in the living room because it was bothering a resident's eye. The act was routine, a kindness. After helping all of the residents to bed that night, she came back up from the hall only to find it was turned back on. The light was a defiance. Glowing without cause, she thought someone was in the house. The fear was worse. The house alive. A worker on the midnight shift mentioned that she had the lights on in the main part of the house. The lights were her shield, a barrier against the dark. She had gone into another area of the house, and when coming back out, she found the lights out and very dark. The darkness was a presence, heavy and wrong. One evening after my shift, I was talking to one of my good co-workers over the phone as she was working at the house. Her voice was steady, but her story was not. She told me that she had heard something in the hall area near some of the bedrooms. The sound was a whisper, a call from the shadows. To her surprise, she found one of the Christmas ornaments that hung on a door knob, moving all on its own. The ornament was a specter, alive with intent. It was repeatedly lifting out and hitting the door in a quick, timely manner, creating continual knocking. The rhythm was a message, chilling and precise. The ornament was very light, made of felt in Christmas colors with small bells lined down the middle and front. Its delicate form belied its eerie motion. There was also a small brown felt Christmas tree on the bottom of the front. The tree was a detail, innocent yet wrong. All of the bedroom doors had one of these kind of ornaments hanging from the outer door, or knobs to decorate for Christmas. They were festive, yet one was alive. What creeped me out was the methodical, rhythmic way it was knocking, as if something was saying hello. The knocking was a greeting from something unseen. She took a video on it on her phone, and I asked her what she thought about it. The video was a truth, undeniable and strange. She said she didn't know what to think. Her confusion was mine, a shared unease. She wasn't one to believe in ghosts. Her skepticism was a mirror, reflecting my own doubts. I thought that maybe she was trying to play a funny prank on me. The idea was a comfort, quickly dismissed. I tried to use a fan to blow the ornament and see if I could get it to move like it had been before. The experiment was desperate, seeking logic. The fan just made it blow in all directions. No matter what speed I set or where the fan was placed, the result was chaos, not precision. It seemed to me that if a string was used to make it move, the ornament could have been much heavier. For a quick pull of gravity to make that precise knocking, the house defied reason, its secrets growing. Some months later, a new employee started working the midnight shift and was doing room checks. Her presence was fresh, her eyes unclouded by the house's history. When approaching the door that once had the moving Christmas ornament, she heard the little elderly resident inside speaking with someone that sounded like another elderly lady. The voices were a mystery, soft but clear. This was when all the other residents were soundly sleeping in their own rooms. The solitude amplified the strangeness. Some nights later, I was told that the same resident came out of that room in hysterics one night, fearing that demons would harm her. Her fear was a shock, out of character. I heard of this happening at least twice. The resident's terror was a beacon, signaling something wrong. This was entirely out of character for her. Her calm was legendary. Her fear new. Demons were never something she'd speak of. The word was alien, her panic profound. Perhaps she was reacting to something in that room. The room was a vortex, drawing in dread. Years later, the room became open for another occupant. Time passed, but the room's shadow lingered. Another little lady came to stay. Her arrival was quiet, her presence a light. When she was being assisted to her room for bedtime every night, she always stood in the doorway making the sign of the cross and would say, "Bless the room." Her ritual was a shield, instinctive and solemn. This I know to be true. I had seen her do it. The act was a prayer, a defense against the unseen. No one had told her the story of it. Her actions were unprompted, her instinct sharp. It was as though she knew that something wasn't quite right with it. The room was tainted, its aura heavy. One afternoon, a worker came in for her shift, and the company owner also came in around the same time, needing some help, taking some stuff down to the basement. The task was mundane, a break from the eerie. We braced the basement door, which was designed to swing shut and automatically lock. The door was a barrier, its lock a constant. My coworker bumped a tall, thick drinking glass off the kitchen counter. The accident was sudden, a jolt in the quiet. It hit the hard tile floor, sliding towards the open basement door, and down the stairs it went. The glass was a missile, its fall a cacophony. I could hear it hitting every step before landing at the bottom. The sound was a warning, echoing in the stillness. It was a tall stairwell, and I dreaded cleaning broken glass. The task loomed, a chore I feared. I went to retrieve it, not seeing any broken glass on the steps. The stairs were clean, a surprise. When I picked up the glass, I could find no breaks, cracks, or chips upon examining it, though when I had been expecting to find it damaged in at least some way, the glass was whole, defying physics. There was also kind of chaplain that would come to the house and tell inspirational stories to the residents. The chaplain was a beacon, his presence a comfort. He would sing and play music to them and have them sing along. His songs were a balm, lifting spirits. They loved him. His warmth was a light in the house's gloom. I briefly mentioned to him about paranormal things happening around the house, and I asked him if he could bless the house, and he said a nice prayer. His prayer was a shield, a hope for peace. One day when I was at work, a frequent visitor called me over to her and shockingly told me that something had just whispered her name in her ear. The whisper was a violation, chilling her. Another day when she was visiting, she mentioned feeling an oppressive, threatening feeling as she went through her mother's clothes in the closet. The closet was a trap, its air heavy with menace. She said that she was going to bring in some holy water and bless the house. Her resolve was firm, a plan born of fear. She and I were in agreement on never talking about anything we discussed about the house. The pact was a bond, our silence a shield. One day, not too long after, she brought in the holy water and we walked through the house in prayer. The ritual was solemn, a cleansing. She marked each door in this sign of the cross with holy water, and the paranormal activity seemed to die away after that for a bit. The calm was fleeting, a fragile peace. One night, a co-worker working the midnight shift was putting up Christmas decorations on the fireplace mantel. The decorations were festive, yet tainted. She took pictures with her phone camera of how it looked when she was done. The photos were a record, capturing the strange. A picture I had her sent to my phone shows eerie bluish rays near the fireplace mantel by the ornaments and by the Christmas tree. The rays were ghostly, unexplained. She told me she had done a video in the room and it showed some really crazy stuff, but she deleted it. The deletion was a loss, a truth erased. It was fun to kid co-workers and put out Christmas ornaments like that one moving on its own. The jest was uneasy, the ornament suspect. So, I don't know what it was with the Christmas decorations, but something seemed strangely attached to them. The ornaments were a mystery, their movement a curse. The house owner apparently bought many of them at different yard sales. Their origins were murky, tied to the house's unease. I had also worked with two good co-workers, each in different years, who noticed the strange feeling from the house and surrounding area. Their stories echoed mine, a shared dread. We often wondered and talked about possible causes of it. The discussions were hushed, seeking answers. The final creepy experience that I recall happened one afternoon when I stayed after my shift and was talking with a coworker and a visitor in the kitchen. The kitchen was a haven, its normalcy fragile. We were talking about some of the weird things about the house, and she was sharing some of her own paranormal experiences that had happened in her own life. The conversation was a bridge connecting our fears. Right in the middle of conversation, 3 loud, distinct knocks could be heard coming from a nearby bathroom that was in plain view. The sound was a shock, sharp and clear. We all heard it. The knocks were a call, undeniable. None of us recalled seeing anyone go in there, and residents would have needed assistance walking anyway. The emptiness was chilling. The bathroom a void. We opened the bathroom door to find it dark and empty. The darkness was a lie, hiding the truth. The house was a haunted haven, its secrets unyielding. I searched X for tales of haunted care homes, finding stories of restless spirits tied to new buildings. Some spoke of objects moving, others of whispers in empty rooms. The house's mysteries lingered, but the holy water's calm held for a time, a fragile shield against the unseen. Story number 7, The Shadow in the Scout House. The Scout Camp is a haven of pine and laughter, but the old house on the hill holds darkness. I'm a Cub Scout, young and eager, joining troops from across the region for a weekend of racing wooden cars. In Canada, we have a scout system similar to the U.S. Our system is bi-level: beavers, Cub Scouts, and venturers. The air smells of cedar, but unease lingers. There was this house on the property of camp. Beautiful house, nice wooden smell. The house is grand, but its shadows whisper. During this time, all the troops around us gathered for a weekend up at the house, and there were maybe 6 or 7 troops gathered. The rooms divide us. The house was split into 2 rooms, one for males and one for females. Boys and girls sprawl across the floors in sleeping wolves, a closet door linking our worlds. There was a closet door connected to each room. 10 to 20 boys crowd our room, 10 to 15 girls in theirs. At the time, there were maybe 10 to 20 guys in one room and maybe 10 to be females. The wooden beams creak under history's weight. We would all be sleeping on the floors with our sleeping bags. Whispers of ghosts stir fear. After brushing teeth, we huddle in the boys' room, trading stories. After brushing, me and the guys went back down to the guys' room. One kid claims the house is haunted, the closet tied to a hanging. One of the kids said that this place was haunted and that the closet that leads into the girls' section was where someone was hanged. I feel it, a chill from that door. I always had a strange feeling about the doorway. I moved my sleeping bag far from it, then to the center, avoiding the air vent's eerie breath. I specifically put my sleeping bag across the other side of the room. There was also an air vent there, and I was afraid as well. So I then moved it into the middle. The shadow moves. Counselors hush our chatter, and sleep claims us. That night after the counselors shushed us to sleep, because you know, guys, we talk for hours on end if we're told not to sleep. I wake, eyes on the closet. The closet door was slowly opened. A figure, 6 feet tall, black as Vanta Black, glides silently. I see a shadow no bigger than 6 foot. It was crazy tall for its size. Best I can describe it from memory is like the color Vant Black. It's blurry, yet sharp, a void in motion. It was very blurry but crisp until the middle. It's coming for me. It slowly inched its way across the wooden floorboards with no sound, suddenly passing each kid as it went by. I turn away, trembling, as it nears. I didn't want this thing to see me, so I turned my head, and it passed more kids. The air grows frigid, a bone-deep cold. The more it approached me, the more I felt dread. Not only did I feel dread, but the air got colder. It passes me, turning the doorknob, exiting silently. This thing was literally turning the doorknob. It pulled the door open and slowly exited before, strangely enough, shutting the door behind itself. Morning reveals a carving on the closet door, ancient symbols, like eyes watching. It's not gone. One of the kids said, "Did you guys see that shadow last night?" 4 of us nod, eyes wide. We all blurted out that we move our bags, but the house remembers. What else lurks behind that door, waiting in the dark? Story number 8, The Whispers in the Ruins. The tech school's ruins beckoned, a labyrinth of decay and secrets. I was exploring an abandoned multi-level tech school building for fun and creepy sensations. Its halls were silent, but something stirred within the walls. I came for thrills, but the darkness had its own plans. What I found was no game. It was a nightmare carved in dust. A sound broke the stillness, soft and eerie, like whispers from the dead. I thought I heard voices cooing down from the floor above me. They weren't human, but they called, pulling me deeper into the ruin. The air grew thick, the shadows alive with unseen eyes. I wasn't alone, and the building knew it. The truth came crashing down, a rodent from the dark. Then a rat fell out of a vent duct behind me, and I realized the voices were the augmented chatter of rodents. The walls pulsed with their skittering, a hidden swarm. The voices weren't spirits. They were alive, and they ruled this place. My courage faltered. The ruins closing in. Every step was a battle. The building a gauntlet of fangs. I was already feeling a bit like Diablo. Given how many spiders I had to kill just to get where I was, webs clung to me, their makers lurking in every corner. The school wasn't empty. It was a kingdom of creeps. I pressed on, but the horror was just beginning. In the bomb shelter, a grim relic told a darker tale. In the bomb shelter portion of the building, there was a roasting spit that some homeless person had set up, and there was a dog skeleton where the fire would have been. A dog's bones lay scorched, a meal born of desperation. The ruins held more than decay, they held tragedy. I fled, haunted by what I'd seen. The abandoned tech school stood like a forgotten titan, its multi-level husk a maze of crumbling dreams. The walls were full of them. I'd come for the thrill, the eerie rush of exploring a place time had forsaken. The air was heavy with dust, each step crunching over debris. The building was a relic, its classrooms silent, its halls choked with shadows. I felt like a hero in a dark game, ready to face the unknown. But the unknown answered back. A sound drifting from above. It was soft, almost melodic, like voices murmuring secrets. My flashlight flickered, catching cobwebs that draped like curtains. Spiders settled, their eyes glinting, guardians of this forsaken place. I swatted them away, my nerves fraying with each kill. The building wasn't just empty, it was alive. Its decay, a mask for something deeper. Then came the rat, tumbling from a vent with a sickening thud. Its squeal echoed, and the whispers sharpened into a chorus of rodent chatter. The walls thrummed, alive with their hidden swarm. My heart raced, the thrill turning to dread. I wasn't Diablo, I was prey. Stumbling through a nest, the school's silence was a lie. Its true voice, the skittering of countless claws. I pushed deeper, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. Broken desks, shattered glass, and faded posters littered the floors. Each room told a story of abandonment, but the rats were the new tenants. Their eyes watched from cracks, their chatter a warning. I wanted to run, but curiosity held me, a need to see what else the ruins hid. The basement called, its bomb shelter, a vault of secrets. The stairs creaked, the air growing heavier. My beam found the spit, a crude metal frame over a charred circle. Below it, a dog skeleton, its bones brittle, a silent dream in the dark. Someone had lived here, driven to eat a companion in despair, sad and disturbing that someone would be driven to eat an animal, capable of empathy, but desperate times, I suppose. The sight broke me, the thrill gone, replaced by sorrow. The building wasn't just creepy, it was a graveyard of hope. The rat's chatter followed, a relentless reminder of life in the decay. I turned, my steps quickening, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The shelter's walls closed in, their concrete stained with unseen stories. I fled, the school's darkness chasing me. I mostly poked around and then got the hell out of there. The exit loomed, a promise of light, but the building's weight clung to me. The rats, the spiders, the skeleton, they were etched in my mind. I emerged, gasping, the night air cold but free. The tech school stood behind, its whispers fading, but its horror stayed. The ruins are still there, I'm sure, their secrets buried in dust. I see the dog's bones in my dreams, hear the rat's endless song. The thrill of exploration is gone, replaced by a lesson in despair. Some places aren't meant to be disturbed. Their stories too heavy to carry. I'll never return. But the school's shadow follows, a whisper I can't silence. Story number 9, The Swarm and the Storm. The road wasn't just a path, it was a gauntlet. Out in the vast, lonely stretches of America's highways, Clara, a seasoned trucker, faced the monotony of long hauls. But nature had other plans, ready to unleash its fury. My mom is a trucker, and this is her story. Her life was miles of asphalt, punctuated by moments of raw terror. The desert and the plains held secrets, waiting to test her. She was driving through Arizona when she saw what she thought were leaves blowing across the road in the distance. The Arizona horizon shimmered, but something was wrong. This puzzled her, since there's mostly pine trees in northern Arizona. Clara squinted, expecting debris, but the road pulsed with life, a writhing mass that chilled her blood. When she finally got to the leaves, she realized that they were migrating tarantulas, thousands of them. The truck skidded on their crushed bodies, a grotesque carpet of legs and guts. There were so many of them that her truck was sliding on their guts, and she had to slow down. She stopped at a truck stop, refusing to leave the cab. She stopped at the first truck stop and told her co-driver to fuel up as he was sleeping at the time because she wasn't going to step foot outside her truck after what she just saw. Her co-driver, groggy and annoyed, scoffed until he saw the evidence. Her co-driver was pissed, since it was technically his off time and he thought she was crazy, until he saw the tarantula guts and legs caking the inside well of the truck. The wheel wells were coated, a testament to the swarm scale. Clara's nerves were raw, the desert's indifference, a cruel reminder of her vulnerability. But another trial loomed, one that dwarfed the spiders. The Midwest skies turned black, a storm brewing with deadly intent. She also outran a tornado in the Midwest. The tornado was a monster, tearing through the plains. She was about to pull over and take cover until she saw another big rig that was parked on the side of the road get tossed a couple of 100 yards like a toy. Clara's heart raced, knowing she faced death. She called me and told me that she thought she was going to die, and she wanted her last words to be, "I love you" to me. She veered off the highway, seeking refuge. She pulled off the freeway and got into a Walmart where she ran into the shelter where all the staff and customers were taking refuge. The storm roared, shaking the earth. After the tornado passed, they stepped out of the basement and into daylight since the Walmart was destroyed. The swarm and storm were only part of Clara's saga. She has many stories like this. Trucking is 90% boredom. Attend insane stuff like this. Each mile brought new dangers, flash floods, rogue wildlife, skies that turned hostile. She carried the weight of those moments, each one a scar. Clara upgraded her truck's tires, checked weather obsessively, and kept a survival kit close. One night, she swore she saw spider legs in the shadows of her headlights, but it was just her mind. She shared her tales with other drivers, finding camaraderie in their own brushes with nature's wrath. Some spoke of tarantula migrations, others of storms that seemed alive. Clara joined an online trucker forum, documenting her experiences to warn newcomers. The road wasn't just a job, it was a battleground. A package arrived once, no sender, with a small, preserved tarantula leg inside. It felt like a taunt, a reminder of the swarm. Clara tossed it, but the road's lesson stayed. The swarm and the storm were her crucible, forging a resilience she'd never lose. Story number 10, The Stalker's Shadow. You're driving through the city, dropping off a lost phone, when a red car pulls up behind you. Its driver watches, too closely, too intently. Why is she following you? A coincidence or something planned? Her eyes tracking your every turn through the streets? You weave through alleys, heart racing, but she's still there, relentless. Her presence a tightening noose. This isn't just a routine errand, it's a chase. A silent threat that leaves you questioning who you can trust. You lose her, but the danger lingers. Was she gone or waiting to strike again? Her motives hidden in the shadows. Balancing multiple jobs was my reality. Like so many others scraping by in a relentless world, like most millennials, I have to work multiple jobs to make money. And one of these jobs is driving for Lyft. Driving for Lyft offered flexibility, a chance to meet people, and extra cash. A very friendly and pleasant passenger forgot her phone in my car. I didn't notice until she pinged me through the app, her message polite but urgent. I didn't discover that until the morning when she sent a notification through Lyft, busy with other work. I delayed returning it until later, when she shared her address. Since I had other work to do, I didn't get to returning the phone until early this afternoon. By then, my passenger had given me her address. The apartment complex was tucked off a narrow one-way road, deserted in the daylight. So, I drove to her apartment to return the phone. Now, this apartment has a very narrow one-way road running in front of it, but it was empty since it was the middle of the day. I parked, hazard lights flashing, and left the phone in a safe spot. So, I parked my car on the road with the hazard lights on to return the phone. It took me a few minutes at most to figure out where to leave the phone. As I returned, a woman in a red car pulled up behind me, her window rolling down, and once I left the phone somewhere safe, I saw a lady in a red car pull up behind me and ran down the stairs to go grab my car. She rolled down the window and asked if I was looking for someone. Her voice was calm, but her stare wasn't. Something felt wrong. I brushed her off, saying I'd found who I needed, and sped away, cutting her mid-sentence. I told her I had found who I was looking for, jumped back into my car while she was still speaking, and drove out of her way and out of the apartment complex. That should have been it. Craving coffee and food, I headed to Starbucks, staying on the main road. That should have been the end of it. I decided to drive to Starbucks since I was hungry and going through caffeine withdrawals. So, I stayed on the main road and headed that way. Then I saw her, the red car, right behind me. That's when I noticed something peculiar. The lady was following right behind me. Why was she there? The road led everywhere, so I dismissed it. But when I signaled left toward a shopping plaza, she followed. But since that road leads to practically everything else in my city, I didn't think anything of it until I signaled to turn left to go to a shopping area and noticed that she was still behind me. Suspicion grew, and I veered into a one-way street lined with banks and shops, realizing too late it was a dead end. Growing suspicious after I made my left turn, I turned suddenly into a road that led into a bank and other small businesses. Not realizing it was a one-way. She was still there. I turned back to the main road, and she mirrored me, relentless. When I reached the dead end, I turned around and headed back to the main road, only to realize this lady was still stalking me. What did she want? Panic surged as I cut through a parking lot, weaving toward a movie theater, desperate to lose her. In panic, I reached the main road, turned into another parking lot, and cut through to a local movie theater, and kept driving until I was sure I had lost her. My pulse pounded, eyes darting to the rearview mirror, but she was gone. When I noticed the lady wasn't following me anymore, I drove to Starbucks, got my food and drink, and returned home. Was she really gone? At Starbucks? I grabbed my order and headed home, trying to shake the unease with video games, returned home, played some video games and other stuff, and ran upstairs to tell my story on Reddit. But then I saw it, an email from Lyft, warning me about unsafe driving, only to discover that Lyft had emailed me, issuing a deactivation warning for unsafe driving. Who reported me? I couldn't prove it, but the timing pointed to her. Of course, I can't say with certainty, but given what I've just said, I think it was the stalker that reported me. Why would she do that? Her shadow lingered. I checked my mirrors for days, half expecting the red car to reappear. What was her motive? The city felt smaller, its streets less safe. I dug into the apartment's history, finding reports of petty thefts and suspicious loiterers. Was she part of something bigger? A neighbor mentioned a woman matching her description, often seen watching cars. Had she targeted me before? My Lyft account survived, but the warning stung, a reminder of her reach. I stopped driving at odd hours, sticking to familiar routes. Was I still being watched? The phone's owner thanked me, oblivious to the ordeal, but I wondered if she knew the woman. Some threats hide in plain sight. Story number 11, The Bicycle Stalker. The Walmart was a ghost town, its aisles stretching into shadows. My girlfriend and I had been dating for around 3 years. Our midnight shopping trips were our ritual, a quiet escape from the world. But tonight, the air was wrong, heavy with a presence I couldn't see. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow, and every step echoed like a warning. Something was watching us, and it wasn't friendly. We roamed the empty store, our laughter too loud, too brittle. We are mostly nocturnal creatures, especially when we're used to working the night shift at a factory together. To us, midnight used to be like noon, and we loved going out to the store around this time because we are usually the only 2 of 10 people in the place, including staff. The silence was our playground, but tonight it was a trap. My girlfriend's voice filled the space, but my eyes darted to the corners, searching for what I couldn't name. The feeling hit me like a cold wave, sudden and sharp. One night a year or so ago, we were doing our normal Saturday evening shop at around midnight when I got the strangest feeling not even 5 minutes into our journey. It constantly felt like we were being followed, but every time I would look, there'd be no one there. The aisles were too long, too open, offering no cover from whatever was out there. I shook it off, blaming the late hour, but my heart wouldn't slow. He appeared like a phantom, his gaze a weight on my back. I eventually wrote this off as paranoia and started to have a good time and make an adventure out of the trip. We were finishing up on the non-G grocery side of Walmart, taking the long straightaway roads towards the groceries so we can get down to business on getting food. Then I heard it, a faint click, rhythmic, deliberate, like metal on tile. My head turned, and there he was, a man in the distance, his eyes locked on us. His presence was a violation, a crack in our safe world. When I finally noticed him, I heard a slight clicking noise and looked back casually to see a man pushing a bicycle alongside him, walking a few steps back. It was brand new, like he had just pulled it off the rack as he walked past and was staring at me. His face was unreadable, but his intent was clear. A predator sizing up his prey. My blood ran cold, my instincts screaming to move, to protect. We kept walking, my girlfriend's voice a distant hum as she talked about her Pokemon game. My girlfriend was telling me about her last attempts and statistics of her shiny hunt in Pokemon Ultra. I nodded, but my focus was on him, his steps mirroring ours, the bicycle's wheels clicking like a countdown. I got a bad feeling. I positioned myself on the other side of my girlfriend so that I was between him and her purse, which raised red flags to her. She glanced at me, her smile fading, sensing the shift. I told her to keep walking and act natural. Her hand tightened on the cart, but she obeyed, her voice quieter now. A few minutes go by, and the man makes a mad dash around a medium chip display towards us. His speed was unnatural, a blur of motion that set my nerves on fire. Stopped dead when he saw we didn't flinch. I stood tall, my 6'4" frame a silent challenge, my winter coat hiding my lack of muscle but not my resolve. Now, I'm not exactly a muscular guy, but I suppose my 6'4" stature made him nervous about what I was capable of since I was wearing heavy winter clothing. I never broke eye contact until he turns around and walks back in the direction he was following us from and vanished. His retreat was too quick, too calculated, like a hunter biding his time. We moved on, the groceries a blur, my eyes scanning every aisle for his return. For about 30 minutes, we shopped around, wondering if I was just being paranoid still, and we disregarded it as much. The store felt smaller, its emptiness a threat rather than a comfort. That is, until we were checking out. The cashier's scanner beeped, a normal sound that grated against my nerves. As I finished checking out the groceries and got ready to pay, I saw the same man on the bicycle with a front basket full of food and a woman's purse in his right hand. Pedaling as hard as he could, an employee made an attempt to grab him that was too slow, and he got away. The thief was a streak, disappearing into the night, the purse a trophy of his crime. Then we asked a nearby employee if we just saw what we think we did and told them about what happened with us. And they said they weren't allowed to tell us anything and threatened to charge us with trespassing if we didn't leave immediately. The employee's cold dismissal was a slap, their eyes avoiding ours, as if they knew more than they'd say. To this day, I have no idea if they ever caught the guy or got the purse back. We left the store, the parking lot vast and dark, our car a small island of safety. We still joke about this, and her family says that it's possible I could have died if I fought back. But figure if he had a gun he wouldn't have hesitated like when he did when he finally caught up to us. The humor was thin, a shield against the truth. We'd been hunted, and we'd been lucky. The drive home was quiet, the city's lights blurring past. I kept glancing in the rear view, half expecting to see a bicycle in the shadows. My girlfriend held my hand, her grip tight, her usual chatter gone. We didn't shop at midnight anymore. The thrill of empty aisles, tainted by his face, his eyes. I checked X later, finding posts about Walmart thefts, some mentioning a man with a bicycle, others describing purse snatchers who vanished before security could act. One user claimed a thief had followed them for days, their description chillingly close to our stalker. The store became a memory we avoided, its aisles a labyrinth we'd escaped. My girlfriend's family teased us, but their eyes held worry, their jokes a way to soften the fear. I started carrying a flashlight, its beam a weak defense against the dark. The clicking of his bicycle haunted me, a sound I heard in quiet moments, in dreams where he followed, always just out of sight. Months later, I saw a news clip online, a man arrested for theft at a Walmart. His photo grainy but familiar, white hair, lean frame, a bicycle in the background. The article said he'd targeted women, stealing purses, following them to learn their routines. He'd been caught, but the purse from our night was never mentioned. I showed my girlfriend, and we sat in silence. The weight of what could have been settling between us. Now, we shop during the day, the crowds a comfort, their noise drowning out the memory of that click. But I still check behind me, still feel his gaze in empty places. The bicycle, the purse, his dash through the store, they're pieces of a puzzle I don't want to solve. Somewhere, he's out there, or someone like him, waiting for the next pair of nocturnal creatures to wander into his path. Story number 12, The Stalker at the Con. The anime convention thrummed with energy, but a shadow clung to me. I'd come alone. My excitement for the panels, Japanese mythology and fandom pride, tinged with unease. I was dropped off with my panel gear and was set to meet at the hotel with two friends, Danny, a girlfriend, and Jade, my sister's ex-husband. Todd was a ghost I thought I had left behind. His name alone made my skin crawl, but I didn't know he was watching, waiting. The crowded hotel lobby felt too open, too exposed. Was I safe here, or had he found me? The hallways buzzed with cosplayers, but my nerves were raw. They let me keep my stuff in the hotel room so that I could enjoy the get my badge and prepare for two panels. I didn't have a smartphone, so I missed my sister's warnings about Todd's presence. Each laugh, each shout in the crowd made me jump, as if his voice was hidden among them. I pushed through, focusing on my panels, but the unease grew. Why did I feel like I was being hunted? After my first panel, I collapsed into a lobby chair, exhausted but relieved. I finished my first panel and Jade treated me to some food. We grabbed hot dogs from a nearby 7-Eleven, joking as we ate. Then he appeared, Todd, swaying, his eyes glassy with alcohol. A stranger, until his voice slurred my name. He asked me why I wasn't home, minding my fiancée like a good girlfriend. My blood ran cold, his words a knife twisting in my gut. I stood, heart racing, and fled to the hotel room. How did he know I was here? In the room, I dialed my fiancé, Rick, my hands shaking. I went back to Jade and Danny's room to call Rick. He promised to come, urging me to stay put. The hotel's hum felt oppressive, its walls too thin to keep Todd out. Then a scream echoed down the hall, "He has a knife!" My stomach dropped, fear choking me as Danny peeked out and saw Todd, raging, coming for me. Danny closed and locked the door, hoping Todd didn't see us. Was he close enough to hear my heartbeat through the door? The room became a fortress, but my fear was a prison. Todd was caught, but it was so dim in the halls of the hotel, no one could tell. Security hauled him away, banning him from the con. I clung to Jade, my body trembling, visions of his knife flashing in my mind. Rick arrived, his presence a shield, and stayed through my final panel. But the con's joy was gone, replaced by a dread that followed me home. We decided to stop going to conventions for a year. Could I ever feel safe in a crowd again? The hotel's neon lights faded as we left, but Todd's shadow lingered. My sister and Mom opted to extend the no-contact order onto Rick and I against Todd. I learned later he'd stalked me through a fake Facebook account, tracking my plans. Each post I'd made felt like a beacon, drawing him closer, a predator I'd never suspected. I stopped sharing online. My trust in strangers shattered. The con, once a haven, now felt like a trap, its halls haunted by his drunken slurs. Rick and I avoided conventions, our world smaller but safer. But I still saw Todd in every tall figure, every unfamiliar face in a crowd. I started carrying pepper spray, checking exits wherever I went. My sister's death made it worse. She'd warned me about him. And now her voice was gone. I pored over old messages, piecing together how Todd had found me. His new girlfriend had been there, too, her silence complicit, her presence a question mark. The con organizers tightened security, but it felt like locking the door after the thief had left. I wondered what Todd had planned, what his knife was meant for. The police report was vague, mentioning intoxication but little else. Had he done this before, stalking others? His van a cage for the unwary? I avoided hotels for months, their dim halls too much like the one where he'd hunted me. Each night, I checked my locks, imagining his voice calling my name. We have not seen Todd in 3 years and hope to never do so again. But his threat lived in me, a scar that wouldn't fade. I'm different now, cautious where I was carefree. The con was a turning point, a moment that stripped away my sense of safety. I returned to conventions eventually, but never alone, always with Rick or friends. Each badge I picked up felt like a risk, each panel a test of my courage. I joined online forums, sharing my story anonymously, warning others about men like Todd. Some replied with similar tales, stalkers at cons, exes who wouldn't let go, knives hidden in plain sight. The anime community rallied, creating safety protocols, but I still scanned crowds for his face. I learned self-defense, my small frame no longer a weakness, but a weapon. My friends, Danny and Jade, stayed close, their room a sanctuary that night. I owed them more than I could say. Their quick thinking a wall between me and danger. Rick became my anchor, his patience helping me rebuild. But I still dreamed of that hall, of Todd's voice, of the knife I never saw but felt. I checked social media less, wary of who might be watching. The internet felt like a web, each post a thread that could lead him back. I told my mom everything, her anger at Todd a fire that matched mine. We extended the no-contact order, A legal shield, but a fragile one. The Khan's Hotel changed management. Its hall's brighter now, but I'd never stay there again. I carried my sister's memory, her warnings a guide through a world I no longer trusted. He was banned for the but bans don't erase fear, and I lived with it, a weight I couldn't shed. The world is louder now, its shadows deeper, because I know who's out there. Have you ever felt someone's eyes on you, knowing they mean you harm? Story number 13, The Stranger at Sunset. The sunset was beautiful, but beauty can hide danger. At 16, I was at a summer film camp, a place buzzing with creativity and familiar faces. The college campus, nestled in a rough part of town, was gated, a fortress against the outside world. I was there for filmmaking and knew everyone in the program. The air was warm, the sky ablaze with color, and I felt alive, my camera ready to capture the world. But as the light faded, so did my sense of safety. And something or someone stepped into the frame. Some faces you know, and some you wish you didn't. There was a certain spot on campus where a lot of people would go to watch the sunset. 2 of my friends and I decided to sit out there. The hill was alive with laughter at first. Campers sprawled across the grass, their voices mingling with the evening breeze. There were many people to begin with, so we felt comfortable. My friends and I stayed, my camera in hand, one friend's laptop glowing softly. The crowd thinned as the sky darkened, leaving us 3 alone under the street lamps, unaware of the eyes watching from the shadows. The night has a way of changing what you thought you knew. As it got darker and darker, more and more people went back to their dorms. The 3 of us stayed out even in the dark, and there were street lamps, and I had my camera, and one friend has her laptop, so it isn't pitch black. The campus felt different now, its edges sharper, the gates less reassuring. A man walked in front of us. We waved and smiled as he walked by. His silhouette was unfamiliar, a stranger in a place where I knew every face. The only thing is, I've never seen him before. Even a week ago, before all of the other sessions left, I had never seen him before. My gut twisted, a warning I couldn't shake. Instinct screams when logic stays silent. I tell my friends that it's kind of creeping me out that I've never seen him before. But the one with the laptop said it's nothing to worry about. Seeing as there was campus security doing a checkup on a building near us, I tried to believe her, to trust the security lights in the distance, but the stranger's presence lingered in my mind. The campus, once a haven, now felt exposed, its gates meaningless against whoever he was. I scanned the darkness, my camera heavy in my hands, its lens no longer a tool, but a reminder of my vulnerability. Some threats don't shout, they signal. 10 minutes go by, and he walks in front of us again. After he leaves, the friend with a laptop in a worried voice says, "We need to go." Her voice was sharp, her eyes wide as she slammed her laptop shut. She said that when he walked by again, he looked over his shoulder and did a head nod in the distance. And when she looked over, she saw another man in the darkness. My heart lurched as we grabbed our things. The grass cold under our feet as we hurried toward the dorms. The street lamps cast long shadows, and every rustle felt like a step behind us. The walk back was a blur of fear and adrenaline. We moved quickly, our footsteps echoing in the quiet. The dorm lights, a beacon in the distance. We laughed it off as we got closer to the dorms, but all I could think about to myself was, Why didn't we leave when I said we should? Nobody ever listens to me, even though I have great intuition. The laughter was hollow, a mask for the dread that clung to us. I kept glancing back, expecting to see the stranger or his shadow. His nod to another figure burned into my memory, the campus. Once a place of creativity, now felt like a trap, its open spaces a stage for something sinister. Intuition is a voice you ignore at your peril. Back in the dorm, we locked the door, our breaths ragged. I replayed the night, the stranger's unfamiliar face, the second figure in the dark. Why had he walked by twice? Why the nod? My friend with the laptop admitted she'd felt it too, a chill that wasn't just the night air. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was staff, maybe a lost visitor, but the campus was small, and I knew every face. The security guards we'd seen earlier were nowhere near us when it mattered. I cursed myself for staying, for ignoring the knot in my stomach that screamed to leave. The next day, the campus felt different, its vibrancy dulled by the weight of what we'd seen. I asked around, casually, about the man, but no one knew him. The film camp ended, and we left. But the memory of that night stayed with me. I wondered about the gates, the security, the illusion of safety we'd clung to. The stranger and his unseen partner had vanished, but their presence lingered, a warning of how close we'd come to something darker. Anyway, to the creepy men who seemingly were planning on mugging us, or worse. Let's not meet. I carry that intuition now, sharper than ever, a lens that sees what others miss, a reminder that sometimes the real danger is the one you don't expect. Story number 14, The House on the Hill. The night doesn't welcome you, it watches. Its silence a trap woven from shadows and whispers too faint to hear. You think you're exploring, but the ground beneath you hums with a hunger older than the hills. This isn't an adventure, it's a trespass, and something knows you're here. The mistake was choosing this place. I was 10 years old when I had just gotten my license. I was hanging out with some of my friends from another school district, my girlfriend, and her best friend. We all live in small rural towns that have absolutely nothing to do in a 40-mile radius except a Walmart in between and a few Sheetz gas stations. Since there was nothing to do, we used to go ghost hunting. It pretty much meant finding abandoned buildings and checking them out. None of us really ever experienced anything supernatural, but it was an interesting time, and it involved doing something with friends. I had seen a house off the highway a few times that I wanted to check out, so I told them about it. They all agreed that it was a good idea. The idea sparked excitement, a chance to break the monotony of our small town lives. We decided to stop at Walmart on our way to grab a new flashlight, and I wanted batteries for my camera. Two of my friends and I had bought a flashlight and 2 packs of batteries each, and I bought a 4-pack for my camera. We have a habit of keeping the batteries that come with flashlights as emergency backups because they don't seem to last as long. Armed with new flashlights, batteries, and energy drinks, we were more than ready to head to the house. The journey felt alive with anticipation, but the air grew heavier as we approached. The house was a 2-story one with a basement all broken down and was about a half-mile off the highway in the middle of a huge field. You could pretty much see it on the hill the whole hike. Just seeing it standing there with moonlight shining through it was creepy. let alone the idea of going in it. There was also a barn that had fallen down about 50 yards from the right side. The closer and closer we walked, the weirder and weirder it felt, hair-raising weird. The field was silent, the grass whispering under our feet. The front porch steps were broken, so we had to climb up to the porch to get in, stepping over the debris from other people busting the place up. We made our way. The house groaned, its walls scarred with time and neglect. On our way through the living room to the kitchen, my girlfriend claimed she felt someone pulling the hood on her sweatshirt. But I was the last person, and I was several feet behind. Her voice trembled. I figured she was either so scared that she was imagining things or just saying stuff to try and freak everyone out. Somebody, we should have turned back. We made our way around the kitchen and were on our way upstairs when she gasped and spun around, claiming she felt her hood being pulled and that I was an ass for trying to scare her. I swore it wasn't me, and we continued taking pictures all the way up. The stairs creaked, each step heavier than the last. We made it all the way to the top of the stairs, and I saw a big hole in the attic, so I started walking towards it to take a picture. I snapped one on the way to it, and then another a little closer. The attic stairs were in a room to the left, and there was a hallway with rooms off to the right. We all went to the attic first to check it out, which was all the way up, and there was an old wooden ladder and a broken crate. The attic was empty, dust swirling in our flashlight beams. We walked back down to the second floor, quite disappointed. The house wasn't done with us. At that point, I was the only one with a flashlight out, so everyone followed me through the hallway to a room on the end to the left. It seemed really breezy in the room compared to the rest of the house, even though there were broken open windows all throughout. The air felt alive, pressing against us. After the last person was about 3 steps in, my flashlight went out. It was still turned on, but it seemed like it went dead. The first thing I thought was, there's no way these brand new batteries went dead in 20 minutes in an LED flashlight. Almost instantly after, I heard someone say, "My phone's dead." "Yeah, mine too." From my girlfriend and her best friend. One of my other friends pulled out their flashlight, flicked it on and off, and nothing happened. I pulled my camera from my pocket, took a picture with a hope of maybe catching something weird, but the screen was black with a flashing red dead battery symbol. The darkness swallowed us. At that point, we were all weirded out and practically fighting each other to leave. Once we made it to the stairs, the flashlight worked again. My camera had about 3/4 of a battery bar, and the cell phones were able to be powered back on. The house let us go, but not without a warning. I got goosebumps and tensed up. We hastened our pace down the stairs and figured the easiest way out would be through the basement door that we saw under the porch on our way in, since the porch stairs were broken. Sadly, it wasn't the least creepy way. We made our way down through the basement that turned out to be a basic maze and looked like it had been in the Blair Witch Project. We fought our way through the vines that had grown over the door to the outside and made our way from the house. The air clawed at us about 200 yards from the house. We heard what sounded like a tin food can being spiked on the ground and then rolling down from the basement steps. I don't even remember seeing a tin can anywhere in the house. And we all began running as fast as we could while being careful not to trip over something in the high weeds. The field seemed to stretch, the house looming behind us like a predator. We reached the car, hearts pounding, breath ragged. Once we returned to the car, we tried to theorize what the hell just happened, and I started looking through all the pictures. They all just looked like dust particle-ridden pictures of an old house, except for one. When I snapped the 2 pictures of the attic, the first was just like all the others, but the second had a thick, white, smoky mist over the whole. It wasn't cold, just a coolish night. So there's no way it would have been breath mist, and no one smoked. The mist wasn't natural. To this day, I get goosebumps and a little glassy-eyed every time I look through these pictures. I posted them to a forum for people into the paranormal, and everyone told me I had to make an interesting experience post and that I had taken a very interesting picture. The house didn't let go. We thought we'd escaped, but the pictures haunted us. That mist, a silent accusation. It saw us. I started digging, asking locals about the house. They spoke in whispers, calling it the Hill Place, a site where no one lingered. It had a history. A family vanished there decades ago, their belongings left untouched. No one claimed the land. The barn, they said, wasn't just fallen, it burned, though no fire was reported. The house remembered. My girlfriend stopped sleeping well, her dreams filled with hands pulling at her. She wasn't imagining it. I found scratches on my camera, faint but deliberate, like a mark. It wasn't dust. We weren't alone that night. The forum users urged me to burn the photos, but I couldn't. They were proof. I went back once, alone, to the field's edge. The house stood, waiting. The air was wrong, heavier, the hills silent. I didn't go closer. I saw something move in the attic window. Not a person, but a shape. Too tall, too still. It knew me. I left, the car's engine roaring like a plea. It followed. My room changed. Colder near the window, shadows pooling where they shouldn't. I don't sleep there anymore. I can't forget the mist. The house is still there, its silhouette a scar on the hill. It's not abandoned. I found an old newspaper clipping buried in the library's archives about a ritual gone wrong. A family offering something to the land. They didn't leave. They were taken. The tin can, the mist, the pull on her hood, they weren't accidents. The house claimed us too. My friends drifted apart, each carrying a piece of that night. We don't talk about it. I keep the photos locked away, but I feel them, a weight in the dark. They're watching. Every night I check the windows. I don't drive that highway anymore, afraid of seeing the house in the distance. It's waiting. I don't know what it wants, but it's patient. If you find a house on a hill, don't stop. Don't climb the porch. Don't take pictures. Some places don't let you leave. Story number 15, the stench of the flatbed. The yard was a graveyard of steel, but one truck carried a darker secret. I'm not a trucker, but a dispatcher. My days were spent in a cramped office, juggling routes and drivers. The hum of radios a constant backdrop. We had a driver who had, shall we say, an odor problem. His presence was a storm, a wave of stench that hit you like a brick wall. I'm not talking like body odor, like sweats. I'm talking like stale or urine. It wasn't just bad. It was unbearable. A smell that clawed at your throat. Anytime he'd come into the dispatch office, it was a race to have him leave again. We'd fake phone calls, shuffle papers, anything to get him out before the air turned toxic. His name was Carl, and he was a walking mystery. The kind of putrid tang that would make you gag immediately and completely involuntarily, regardless of your best efforts. He was a big man, his frame heavy, his steps slow, his eyes distant. The driver was a rather heavy-set guy, nice enough, but a little slow. He was kind, almost gentle, but his slowness made you wonder what went on in his head. The smell followed him like a shadow, lingering long after he'd gone. We let it go until we started getting complaints from customers about the smell. It wasn't just us. Clients were calling, their voices sharp with disgust. They weren't delicate types either. These were hard men, used to dirt and sweat. The complaints came from the toughest crowds. Now, this driver was a flatbed driver, meaning most of his deliveries were onto construction sites, job sites, steel and lumber mills. His routes took him to open-air sites, where lumberjacks and steel workers toiled under the sun. Therefore, 90% were outdoors, and in the company of rough and tough dudes who otherwise wouldn't give a damn what you smelled like. These guys didn't flinch at grease or grime. But Carl's stench was another beast. We get a couple of phone calls a week from a job foreman saying that they wouldn't take this guy onto their site anymore. They banned him, saying the smell made their crews sick, even in the wide open air. It was a problem we couldn't ignore anymore. We tried to fix it, but Carl was a wall. We started delicately attempting to bring it up. Trying to urge proper hygiene, we'd drop hints, suggest deodorant, ask about his routine, but he was unmoved. He claimed he showered every day, or at least every other day at worst, and that he just smelt like that and has had the problem for as long as he could remember. "It's just me," he'd say, his voice flat, his eyes avoiding ours. There was nothing he could do. We wanted to believe him, but the stench told a different story. It was more than a body could produce. It was unnatural, a chemical assault that defied explanation. The truth came crashing down in the shop. At some point, he had to bring his truck in for maintenance. Carl's rig needed a gear shift check. Routine work, nothing special. It was a company truck. He didn't own it. The truck was his home on the road, assigned to him alone. But we don't rotate trucks. So he had the same one for months. The mechanic, a grizzled guy named Joe, climbed into the cab, tools in hand. He lasted seconds before stumbling out, his face green, retching onto the gravel. Upon climbing into the cab, the mechanic promptly did a 180. "You gotta see this," he gasped, pointing to the cab. It was then that the big piss bucket was discovered. The cab was a nightmare, a chamber of horrors. I'm not talking like a Gatorade bottle or something that he took a leak in once when he didn't have time to stop. This wasn't a quick fix for a long haul. It was deliberate. I'm talking like a job site shop bucket filled nearly to the brim with urine. The bucket sat on the floor, its contents sloshing, the liquid dark and foul. The floor around it was wet, indicating that part of it had splashed out. The cab was a furnace of stench, the air thick with decay. The inside of the cab, I'm told, because I was too chicken to go anywhere near it, smelled like him times 10. I stayed back. But the rumors flew. The walls were yellowed, the seats stained, the smell a living thing. It was basically pure concentrated evil. We had to act, but the truck was cursed. The walls of the cab had a slight yellow borschi, The company fired Carl, citing customer complaints. A kinder excuse than the truth. We fired the driver, using the complaints from the customers as the excuse. The truck was towed to the yard, its doors flung open, left to breathe. Then parked the truck outside in the yard, doors and windows open for a week just to dull it. A brave soul, decked in makeshift hazmat gear, went in with bleach and prayers, then had a guy with a ghetto pieced hazmat suit, rubber gloves, rubber boots, mask, rain slicker X, had to go in there and douse the whole thing in bleach and cleaners. But the smell laughed at their efforts, unyielding. And yet, no matter what they did to it, they could not get rid of the smell. The truck became a legend, a ghost in the yard. That truck sat outside in our yard for a full year. It stood under rain and snow, its windows gaping, the wind howling through, windows and doors standing open, rain, snow, blustery wind. We thought time would cleanse it, but we were wrong. It just sat wide open to the elements. The boss, tired of the eyesore, sealed it up to test it. One day, a year later, the boss decided to close it up and see how it was. The stench hit him like a fist, unchanged, eternal. It was just as bad as the day they tried to clean it. He scrapped the truck soon after, sending it to the junkyard, a relic of Carl's secret. He scrapped the truck a week later. The smell lingered in our minds, a warning. Carl vanished. His story a whisper among the drivers. We never learned why he kept that bucket. What drove him to live in such filth? The yard felt lighter without the truck, but the memory of that smell was a scar. I'd catch a whiff of something sour in the office and freeze, half expecting Carl to walk in. The drivers joked about it, but their laughter was uneasy, their eyes darting to the empty lot where the truck once stood. That bucket was more than a mistake. It was a glimpse into a man's hidden world, a darkness we'd never understand. Story number 16, The Cab Driver's Deception. At a teen, I thought I knew how to spot danger until I stepped into his cab. I was teen, young and headstrong, caught up in a romance my parents didn't approve of. I was dating a boy a few years older in the neighboring town from mine, and getting to him was my mission. My parents were not too keen on the fact I was dating an older guy, so I was left to my own devices. I called my boyfriend, who called me a cab, trusting the ride would be quick and safe. But the man behind the wheel had other plans, and his lies turned a short trip into a test of survival. This wasn't just a cab ride. It was a trap I barely escaped. Some people wear their menace like a second skin. The guy picked me up outside my school, his eyes scanning me in a way that made my skin crawl. He was a younger guy, but older than my boyfriend, and maybe around 25. Right away, I got sketched out by the way he looked at me, his gaze lingering too long, too bold. He insisted I sit in the front seat, claiming his back seat was pretty messy. A cab with a messy back seat? My instinct screamed warning, but I climbed in, hoping to be wrong. His smile was too wide, his questions too personal, and I was already counting the minutes to safety. Trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered by a single lie. I got in the front and thought a quick 10-minute cab ride will be over soon. I messaged him to tell him I was in the cab, expecting a straight shot to my boyfriend's house. But then he spoke. his voice casual but calculated, saying I would be going to my boyfriend's house, but he had to get another person and drop them off first. My heart sank. Cabs don't work like that. He got on the walkie and lied to the cab company, saying he didn't pick me up yet. This wasn't a detour. This was a deliberate deception, and I was caught in his web. Fear sharpens your senses, but it can't always save you. I was a nervous person, always taught about stranger danger, and every fiber of my being told me to run. I planned on jumping out the cab and running if you tried anything. Then he picked up another passenger, an old man, who said, "Oh, so you're bringing your girlfriend to work." The driver didn't even correct him. Letting the assumption hang, I gripped my phone, my lifeline. His silence confirmed my fear. This wasn't a mistake. It was a game, and I was the prize. Sometimes survival depends on someone else's voice. I knew something was wrong and messaged my boyfriend on the sneak. He called me and asked to talk to the driver, his anger crackling through the line. The driver's facade slipped, his voice sharp as he snapped, "Why'd you call him? I'm not a creep." He handed me a stack of papers, claiming he needed help with his route. I refused, demanding to be dropped off. His lies were unraveling, but so was my sense of safety. Would I make it out before he tried something worse? The cab smelled of stale coffee and something sharper, like old leather left too long in the sun. I didn't have a car, so my options were limited. Walk 45 minutes to my boyfriend's house or scrape together cab fare. Sometimes, if I was feeling energetic, I'd walk to his house after school. But that day, exhaustion won. I was on my own. A reality that felt heavier as the driver's eyes flicked toward me. His questions probing deeper than small talk should. I'm really good at reading people with bad vibes, and this guy radiated them. His casual tone a thin veil over something predatory. I clutched my phone, my thumb hovering over my boyfriend's number, ready to call if things got worse. The road stretched ahead, familiar houses blurring past, but the driver's words twisted my stomach. I do remember telling him that I would be going to my boyfriend's house, trying to keep the conversation neutral. His response, he had to get another person and drop them off first, hit like a warning shot. I was like, "What?" And alarm bells were going off in my head. I was thinking that this is not what normally happens. But I clung to the fact that he is a guy who worked for a legit cab company. Surely, his job tracked him, right? But then, he was going to another fare closer by first. His lie to the dispatcher, a cold confirmation of my fears. I scanned the door, calculating if I could leap out at a stoplight. When he pulled over to pick up the old man, I held my breath. He ended up picking up the other person, an old man in the same direction of my boyfriend's house. He didn't mention his messy back seat to the guy, and the inconsistency gnawed at me. The old man's comment, "Oh, so you're bringing your girlfriend to work," sent a chill down my spine. The driver didn't even correct him and just say, "No, she's a customer." My fingers flew across my phone, typing a frantic message to my boyfriend. So I knew something was wrong. He called me, his voice tight with rage, demanding to speak to the driver. I don't know what he said, but he was obviously pissed off. And the driver's reaction, the driver hung up, only deepened my dread. The driver's tone shifted, defensive now. "I just wanted you to help me with my route," he said, shoving a stack of papers toward me. He would drop me off at the end, he claimed, but I wasn't buying it. I told him I needed to get to my boyfriend's now. My voice was steady, but inside, I was unraveling. I don't know how, but he ended up dropping me off, tires screeching as he sped away, peeling away before my boyfriend could get his hands on him. He vanished into the dusk. I stood outside my boyfriend's house, shaking, the weight of what could have happened crashing over me. My boyfriend's call had been my shield, but it didn't erase the terror of those minutes. Back at my boyfriend's, I recounted every detail, my words tumbling out in a rush. I can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't have a boyfriend who was angry on the phone and shook him. That's the most I remember, the fear blurring the edges of the memory. We did call the cab company and file a complaint, but the response was vague, a promise to look into it. I'm not sure whatever came of it, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. I never took another cab for a long time. The thought of being trapped in a stranger's car too much to bear. Now, to this day, I always get nervous if I have to take an Uber. My phone glued to my hand. Location shared with anyone who'll check. The experience changed me, etching caution into my bones. Thanks for ruining cabs for me, I thought, replaying the driver's face, his too wide smile, his calculating eyes. I wondered if he'd done this before, if other girls had felt that same creeping dread. The town felt smaller after that, its quiet streets hiding threats I hadn't seen before. I started noticing things. Cars idling too long, strangers lingering at corners. Maybe I was paranoid, but that cab ride taught me that safety is a lie you tell yourself until it's tested. I don't know what the driver wanted, but I know I escaped something dark, and I'm not sure I'll ever trust a stranger's wheel again. Story number 6, The Stranger in the Aisles. The fluorescent lights of Walmart buzzed like a warning, but I didn't hear it. At 19, I was high on the freedom of my first real house, a cramped rental shared with roommates I'd chosen myself. We'd piled into my '98 Bronco, a beast of a car that roared with character, and headed to Walmart for supplies, towels, dishes, the stuff of grown-up life. We decided to head to Walmart to pick up some house things and whatnot. There were 6 of us, me, 4 other girls, and Daniel, one roommate's boyfriend. 6 of us go. It's myself plus 4 female roommates and one roommate's boyfriend called Daniel. The store was a maze of bright aisles, and we dove in, loud and carefree, our laughter echoing off the shelves. I didn't notice him at first, but he noticed me. I've always been a talker, the kind who smiles at strangers, tosses out compliments, or says hello when eyes meet. I compliment strangers, say hello if we make eye contact while walking, that sort of thing. Alone, I'm shy. But in a group, I'm all warmth and chatter. But when in a group, I'm very outgoing and friendly. That night, it was a mistake. We'd been in the store for hours, debating trash bags and snack brands like the adults we thought we were, when I glanced up and locked eyes with a guy. We're 2 hours in and we passed this dude probably our age, but no one can really tell. He was unremarkable. Average height, dark jacket, face half hidden by a cap. I smiled, said, "Hey," and kept walking. As I glance up, we make eye contact, so I feel obligated to say hello. He didn't walk away. We moved on, but he didn't. Minutes later, he crossed our path again, his head bowed, chin tucked low, We are in the store for a solid 4 minutes, haven't even gotten halfway through, and he crosses our paths again. He shuffled toward me, hand outstretched, a scrap of paper trembling in his fingers. "Here," he mumbled, then vanished into the aisle. He walks up to me, with his head down, like with his chin to his chest, sticks out his hand and says, "Here," and rushes away. I unfolded it. A phone number, scrawled in smudged ink. That's his phone number. I laughed, flattered, thinking it was sweet, if awkward. Oh man, that's super sweet. I feel bad having no intention of calling him, but it was a sweet gesture. My roommates teased me, but we shrugged it off and kept shopping. Then he started watching us. We were deep in the store, arguing over which plates were cheapest, when he appeared again, standing stock still in the middle of the aisle, and we crossed paths with him once more. He stops in the middle of the aisle and just stares at us as we pass. His eyes, shadowed under his cap, fixed on me, unblinking. Like I was the only person in the world, my skin prickled. Daniel noticed too, his jaw tightening. I'm a little weirded out, and so is Daniel, the roomie's boyfriend. He grabbed my hand, pulling me close, playing the part of protective boyfriend. And he grabs my hand and starts acting like he's my boyfriend. The guy didn't flinch, just trailed us, his footsteps silent but constant, a shadow we couldn't shake. He was everywhere and nowhere, aisle after aisle. He was there, never close enough to confront, but never far enough to ignore. The guy proceeds to follow us through the remainder of our journey. My roommate's laughter faded, replaced by nervous glances. At the checkout, our 5 carts overflowed, the cashier's eyes weary as she scanned. I spotted him 4 lanes over, clutching a single soda, his gaze still locked on me. We get to the checkout. There are 5 girls, each with a full cart. Poor cashier. I know she was just done, and we see him 4 lanes away checking out with a soda. Daniel's patience snapped. He wrapped an arm around me, voice loud, "Come on, babe, let's get out of here." Daniel is getting uneasy and pissed off, so he grabs my waist and loudly shouts, "Let's go, babe," or some stuff like that. We spilled into the parking lot, the night air sharp against our skin. He followed, his silhouette slipping out the automatic doors behind us. And we walk out. He walks out with us. We reached the Bronco, tossing bags into the back. Our movements hurried. He climbed into a car nearby, a beat-up sedan, its paint chipped, and just sat there, staring. We get to my car and begin loading things, and this guy goes to his car and just sits there staring. Daniel, fuming, grabbed a rubber mallet from a bag and stood by the tailgate, smacking it into his palm like a threat. Daniel is now standing near the back of the car with a rubber mallet, just smacking it into his hand like he's a mobster, thinking it would make the guy leave, but it did not. The guy didn't budge, his eyes glinting in the dark. We piled into the Bronco, my hand shaky as I turned the key. His engine roared to life the moment mine did. We finished loading and pile in to head out. I turn my vehicle on and the dude's vehicle starts as well. I pulled out, the road stretching dark and quiet ahead. But Daniel's voice cut through. "He's following us." We pull out and head home normally until Daniel, who's been watching these headlights like a hawk, says, "Don't go home." My heart sank. His headlights stayed teety in the rear view, tailing us through every turn. The girls in the back whispered, their voices tight with panic. All 5 of the 90-year-old girls he's in the car with start freaking out. Daniel barked, "Drive to the fire station, hurry, now. Drive to the police station or a firehouse or something." That guy's been behind us since we left Walmart. I floored it, weaving through empty streets, the fire station's red sign, a beacon in the distance. His car stayed close until I swerved into the station's lot, tires screeching. He didn't follow, his headlights fading as he sped past. The dude stays with us until we turn into a fire station, and he kept going. We sat there, engine idling, for nearly half an hour, scanning the shadows for his return, and we sat in the parking lot for a good 20 minutes to half hour looking to see if he'd come back. He didn't. We drove home, silent, the weight of the night pressing against us. He didn't, and we head home. Back at the house, we locked every door, checked every window. Daniel stayed up, pacing, the mallet still in hand. The girls huddled on the couch, replaying the night, their voices trembling. I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach churned. That phone number, crumpled in my pocket, felt like a curse. I burned it in the sink, watching the flames eat the ink. The next day, I called the store, describing the guy to a board manager who promised to look into it. Nothing came of it, but I couldn't shake the feeling he'd known more about me than I'd realized. I started noticing things after that. Cars idling too long outside our house, shadows moving just beyond the streetlights. My roommate swore it was paranoia, but Daniel backed me up. He'd seen the guy's eyes, too. That hungry, unyielding stare. We installed a cheap security camera, its grainy footage showing nothing but stray cats and passing headlights. Still, I stopped going out alone at night. Walmart was off limits, its neon sign a reminder of that night's terror. This event is why I haven't been back to Walmart since. I dug into local stories, hoping for answers. A cashier at a nearby gas station mentioned weirdos who hung around big stores, watching people, sometimes following them. She'd heard of a guy matching my description. Dark jacket, quiet, always alone, but no one knew his name online. I found forums about similar encounters, strangers who fixated, followed, then vanished. Some called them stalkers, others something worse, people who thrived in fear, who chose their targets with care. The thought made my skin crawl. My talkative nature didn't die, though I still talk to random strangers, though I can't help it. I really like people. I still smile at passers-by, still say hello, but now I scan their faces, their hands, their eyes. I keep my distance, my keys gripped tight in my pocket. The Bronco's gone, replaced by a sensible sedan, but I miss its rumble, its fearless bulk. My roommates and I drifted apart, life pulling us in different directions. But Daniel and I stayed in touch. He never forgot that night, either. Sometimes I dream of that Walmart, its aisles stretching forever, his shadow at the end of every one. I wake up checking the locks, my heart racing. I don't know who he was, a lonely creep, a predator, or something else. Something that saw my friendliness as an invitation. But to the Walmart creep, let's not meet again. I hope he's gone, lost to the years, but I'll never walk through a store the same way. The world feels smaller now, its edges sharper, and I'm always watching the rear view. Story number 18, The Watcher in the Drive-Thru. The McDonald's was quiet, the hum of the fryer and the chatter of my co-workers, the only sounds breaking the late afternoon lull. I was 16, my headset snug against my ear, ready to take the next drive-through order. The neon lights outside flickered, casting shadows on the empty parking lot. Then the headset crackled and a voice came through, low, gravelly, like it had been scraped raw. "Hello, welcome to McDonald's. What can I get you?" I said, my voice bright, professional. The reply was slow, deliberate. "Oh, wow, you got a beautiful voice." My cheeks flushed, more from surprise than flattery. His tone wasn't warm, it was heavy, like he was savoring each word. I brushed it off. Customers said weird things sometimes. "Thank you, sir. How very flattering. What can I get you?" I kept it polite, glancing out the window. A beat-up sedan idled at the speaker, its windows too tinted to see inside. "I haven't decided yet." A pause, too long, like he was studying me through the speaker. "Can I come to the first window to decide? I want to see who I'm talking to." My stomach twisted, but I couldn't place why. The drive-through lane was empty, so I shrugged it off. "Yeah, sure, sir. That's fine." The sedan rolled forward, slow, deliberate. When it stopped at my window, I saw him, at least 60, with one lazy eye that looked to the left, painfully awful teeth, and patchy dark brown hair. His grin was wide, too wide, and his good eye locked onto me. "Wow, you're as beautiful as you sound." The words felt like oil, slick and heavy. I forced a smile, my fingers hovering over the register. "Thank you, sir. Have you decided what you're going to order?" He leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass. "Are you an option?" The question hung there, his grin stretching wider. I laughed, but it was thin, nervous. His eye never left me, and the air in the booth felt colder. This was my first job, and I wasn't the type to snap at a customer, even one pushing boundaries. I laughed nervously at this. I glanced at the clock, willing the shift to end. "I'll have a cheeseburger he finally said, his voice dropping lower. "Okay, sir, that'll be 99p. Are you paying cash or card?" He ignored the question, leaning even closer. "Where are you from, sweetheart? How old are you?" His questions came faster, each one digging deeper. Then the one that made my skin crawl. "What time did you finish work? 7:30? Why?" I froze. I didn't actually finish at 7:30, but 7:30 was the first number that came into my head when I blurted it out. My real shift ended at 8, maybe later with overtime. But no way was I telling him that. "I can meet you if you want. I can pick you up outside and we can go somewhere." His winking was relentless, his grin a slash across his face. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm really sorry, sir. I'm not allowed to meet customers outside of work. It's against employee policy." A lie, but it was all I had. He didn't back off. And he carries on being insistent, but not getting the picture. I cut him off, my voice sharper now. "Anyway, sir, sorry to be rude, but can I have the 99p for your cheeseburger?" He chuckled, low and wrong. "Ah, yes, sorry. See you at 7:30. He tossed a pound coin through the window and drove to the next one. I stood there, my hand shaking, his words echoing. I'd told him no, but he'd heard yes. My co-worker, Jess, sidled up, her eyes wide. Oh, that guy had a major crush on you. I wanted your number, but I didn't give it to him. He's old enough to be your dad, if not older. I spilled everything. His questions, his grin, the way his eyes seemed to see through me. Jess's face paled. That's not a crush, that's creepy. I nodded, the unease settling deeper. I tried to focus on the next order, but my mind kept replaying his voice, his face. Half the 7 rolled around, and Jess grabbed my arm. He's out there, she whispered, pointing to the parking lot. The creeper was actually waiting in the car park for me, just like he said he would. His sedan was parked halfway down, 4 rows of parking spaces away, but close enough that his silhouette was clear. He was staring at the door, unmoving. My breath caught. At this point, I'm freaking out and head to the back of the store where hopefully he can't see me. The back room smelled of fries and cleaning solution, but it felt like a cage. I crouched by the shelves. Checking my phone every few minutes, Jess kept watch, updating me. He's still there, she'd hiss, her voice tight. I had to stay in the back of the store for 40 minutes before we knew it was safe to come out. My legs ached, my heart raced, but I couldn't leave until he was gone. When Jess finally gave the all clear, I slipped out the employee exit, my hoodie up, eyes on the ground. A week later, I was back on a headset, the drive-through lane slow. The headset crackled, and that voice, his voice, slithered through. I was hoping I'd hear your voice again. Why didn't you meet me the other day? My blood went cold. I ripped off the headset, my hands trembling. 1 second, sir. I'll be with you in 1 second. I bolted to my manager, Mark, and told him everything. The man, the parking lot, the fear that hadn't left me. Mark's face hardened. He took the headset. His voice clipped as he handled the order. When he returned, he looked shaken. When my manager came back to me to let me know he'd gone, he said the creeper had been asking my name, my address, and my surname. Mark leaned close, his voice low. My manager said he was the most creepiest guy he'd ever met, and I was never to have anything to do with him again. He made it a rule, if that man showed up, I was to go to the back room, no questions asked. The man came back, not once, but 3 times over the next month. Each time, Mark or another manager took over, sending me to the back. He still asked about me every time. They never told me what he said, but I saw it in their faces, disgust, worry, something darker. I started dreading my shifts, scanning the parking lot before stepping outside. The McDonald's, once just a job, felt like a trap. One night, closing up, I found a note slipped under the employee entrance. No name, just a scrawl. I'll see you soon. Beautiful. My stomach dropped. I showed Mark, who called the police, but there was no proof it was him. They patrolled the lot for a few days, but nothing came of it. I started taking different routes home, checking my rearview mirror, locking my doors the second I got inside. Months later, I quit. The job wasn't worth the fear, but the man's face, his lazy eye, his grin stayed with me. I'd see him in crowds, in the shadows of parking lots, even when I knew he wasn't there. So, to the creepy McDonald's guy, let's never meet again. I don't know what you wanted, but I know one thing, you were never just a customer. Story number 19, The Stranger in the Sanctuary. I was a 9-year-old kid, wide-eyed and scrawny, at a church of all places. The old stone building loomed over our small town, its stained glass windows glinting like eyes in the summer sun. The church ran a summer camp for kids during the school break. My parents, eager for a quiet house, sent me and my 12-year-old cousin to join the chaos. There we were, 50 kids in a massive church, guided by 5 youth leaders. Laughter echoed through the halls as we watched movies, crafted lanyards, and chased each other in the courtyard. One sunny day, while everyone played at a ball game outside, I went inside to grab my cap to avoid a sunburn. The air was warm, the grass vibrant, but a chill hit me as I stepped into the silent sanctuary. It was a big church, and my bag was right at the front. I froze. I thought it had been at the back. The bag wasn't where I'd left it. My heart skipped. Who moved it? Why? The pews stretched endlessly, shadows pooling in the corners. I grabbed the cap, but a creak echoed from the altar. A man stood there, tall, his face hidden by the brim of a hat. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. My breath caught, legs heavy as stone. I bolted, cap in hand, the door slamming behind me, back outside. I told my cousin, but he laughed it off. The leaders were busy, the kids loud. No one noticed the stranger. That night, I found a note in my bag, scribbled, unsigned. "You shouldn't wander alone." The words burned into me, a warning I couldn't shake. I never saw him again, but I felt him always in every quiet corner of that church. Story number 20, Shadows of Waverly Hills. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium loomed like a forgotten giant, its crumbling walls whispering secrets of the dead. In Louisville, Kentucky, the old tuberculosis hospital was a legend, a place where thousands had perished in agony. Anyone who is big into paranormal activity is probably aware of a place called the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. It's an old tuberculosis hospital that had a lot of people die in it. Mark, a skeptic who scoffed at ghost stories, took a job there in 2000 as a security guard and video assistant. Anyway, I did security tours, caboose video work for them for about 2 years, from 2005 to 2007. The pay was decent, the hours long, but nothing could prepare him for what he'd find inside. Mark didn't believe in ghosts until Waverly Hills forced him to. Now, I will say this before this. I did not believe in ghosts or spirits or what have you. It didn't seem possible. He'd laugh off the tourists who paid $100 to wander the decaying halls, their flashlights slicing through the dark as they hunted for spirits. After working and volunteering there, I left fully convinced the sanatorium had a way of breaking down skepticism, its shadows alive with something Mark couldn't explain. Too many experiences to count, but I'll list the ones that got me the most. Each night chipped away at his doubt, replacing it with a creeping dread. The first incident hit like a jolt of ice water. One morning, after an overnight tour, as people pay $100 to be allowed to roam in the building and ghost hunt for 8 hours, another security guard and myself were walking through the building. Mark and his colleague, Tom, were locking doors after a group of ghost hunters had left. I was walking down the hallway when suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something or someone run. The figure was a blur, darting past a doorway. What really scared the crap out of me was the fact that I also heard bare feet slap the ground As they ran, the sound echoed sharp and unmistakable, like a child sprinting across the tiles. They chased the phantom, but the hallway was empty, the air heavy with silence. We took off after them and should have cornered them, but there was nothing there. Mark's heart pounded as he scanned the corridor, its peeling paint and broken windows mocking their search. The sanatorium was a maze, 5 floors of decay, with electricity only on the lower levels. Now, I will mention that in this building there are 5 floors with electricity only running to 2 of them, with the exception of exit signs. You know, fire codes and such. The upper floors were pitch black, the kind of dark that swallowed light whole. Whatever they'd seen or heard was gone, leaving only questions. Waverly Hills wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it was watching. The incidents piled up, each one sharper than the last. One night, Mark stayed late after a chaotic 12-hour shift with a VH1 film crew. Anyone ever watch Celebrity Paranormal Project on VH1? Well, they came and filmed there. The celebrities, Gary Busey, Hal Sparks, and others, stumbled through the halls. But Mark knew the truth. I will tell you, boy rigged the hell out of this place. Most of the stuff that happens on this episode didn't really happen. The real terror came after hours. When 3 crew members asked to explore, 3 crew members came after hours to check the place out. Mark led them to the 3rd floor, where they sat in a hallway, the silence pressing against their ears. We went into the building on the 3rd floor and sat in the middle of a hallway. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint glow of exit signs. And while I'm looking down the hallway, suddenly the last room I can see starts to light up from inside. A soft glow pulsed from a distant room, like a flashlight swaying in the air. The light in the room was hovering as if someone had a flashlight and was waving it around. Mark approached, his boots heavy on the floor. I got about 10 feet from the door and shut it off. He burst into the room, empty. So I ran in there, and there was nothing. The window was sealed, the other guard on a different floor. I looked out the window to make sure no one was messing with me and called the other guard in the building, but he was on the 5th floor. The light had no source, no explanation. Mark's skepticism cracked. The sanatorium's grip tightening, but the worst was yet to come. Another night, me and another security guard were wrapping up a half-night tour, like the full night tour, but only $50 in 4 hours. On the 2nd floor, Tom stopped dead. As we were walking on the 2nd floor, the guard stopped me. We looked down the hallway and saw the interior-exterior doors were wide open. The doors were massive, locked tight, impossible to open without a key. These doors were installed after the current owners bought the place, and they are big, heavy doors that lock, and you can't unlock them from the outside without a key. Tom swore he saw a tall, dark figure slip through. Anyway, the other security guards swore up and down that he saw a tall, dark figure walk out the door, but I didn't. Mark hesitated, unsure. But they left the doors open, fearing they'd lock out a colleague. After a little debate, we decided that maybe it was another security guard, and we didn't want to lock him out, so we left the doors open. Days later, Mark overheard 2 guards describing the same figure. A few days pass, and while I'm there, I hear 2 other security guards talking about something they witnessed. Their story matched Tom's, a tall, shadowy shape gliding through the halls. When I spoke to them, they told me both the same story, how they both saw the tall, dark figure and went running after it. Then it hit him. A motion detecting camera watched that door. That's the moment when I suddenly realized that there was a motion detecting camera on the door. Mark pulled up the footage, his hands trembling. So, I hit the computer to see what I could find. The video was chilling. What I saw was crazy. The door that was shut out of nowhere just suddenly swings open by itself, and there's no one around. The camera caught the door flying open, no one in sight. The door swings open and no one was there. Hours later, it recorded the guards running out. 4 hours passed, and the next thing on the camera was the guards running out the door. Mark played it again and again, the truth sinking in. Waverly Hills wasn't just a building, it was a portal. A place where the dead lingered, their presence etched into the walls. Scary place, man. I highly suggest visiting it if you get a chance. Years after leaving, Mark couldn't shake the memories. The sanatorium had changed him, its shadows following him into his dreams. He'd hear the slap of bare feet in quiet moments, see flickers of light in empty rooms. The footage of that door became his proof, a tether to the impossible. Waverly Hills was alive, and it had claimed a piece of him forever. Story number 21, The Fire on the Queensland Road. You're driving a massive road train through Queensland's endless highways. The night swallowing the road ahead. A car screams past, reckless, its taillights a fleeting spark. This didn't happen to me, but my father told me about a few years ago when he was driving a road train here in Queensland, Australia. It veers off, flipping into a fiery wreck, and you run toward the blaze, heart pounding. It was him and 3 other road trains, I think, and he was the second guy in line. The driver's screams pierce the dark, trapped in flames, and you're helpless, haunted by his life fading. Some guy tried to overtake all of them before the overtaking lane ended. Another car races by the next night, tempting fate on the same cursed stretch, pushing you to the edge. This lane wasn't very long, about 1 kilometer, and they were few and far between along this road. The road remembers, and so do you. Its scars, a warning, etched in fire and fear. Now, this guy had run out of room by the time he had gotten to the truck at the front. The road is merciless, and it claims its toll. And so, he went off the road and rolled his car. Your father, a seasoned road train driver, navigates Queensland's vast highways. Hauling 3 trailers behind his rig, the truck stopped, and my father got out and ran towards the car, which was now on fire. You hear his story, his voice heavy, recounting a night that changed him. The first truck driver was much closer to the car than my father was, due to these trucks being a good 100 meters long. A car, impatient, tries to overtake the convoy on a short passing lane, its driver misjudging the distance. When Dad got there, the truck driver just had his hands in the air to say, "Nope, I can't handle this." It runs out of road, flipping into a ditch, flames erupting from the wreckage. Your father sprints toward it, the heat searing, but the lead driver, closer, stands frozen, hands raised in surrender. The man inside, still alive, screams, his agony cutting through the night. What he had seen was the man still conscious, flailing about in the car, burning alive. Your father turns away, unable to look, but the image of a life extinguished haunts him. Dad didn't want to see something so horrid that he didn't look. Kuchi, the lead driver, scarred, carries PTSD, guilt gnawing despite his innocence. But he was still haunted by the fact that there was a man alive 1 minute ago driving past him, but was now in the burning car that he saw ahead. The fire lingers, and the road doesn't forgive. The truck driver still has PTSD today and can't get over it and feels terrible, despite the fact it was 100% definitely not his fault. The next night, on the same stretch, another car roars past, pushing 200 kilos to beat the lane's end. Driving back from the road trip, someone tried overtaking my father again on that same stretch of road, not 2 kilometers away from the night before. Police lurk ahead, and the driver slams the brakes, nearly forcing your father's rig to crash. Your father brakes hard, the road train groaning, his heart racing, the wreck's memory raw. There were police up ahead, and the guy was up to about 200 kilometers an hour just to get ahead of Dad before the lane ended. He pulls over, fury spilling out, shouting at the driver, who feigns ignorance, oblivious to the near disaster. So he slams on the brakes just before he can get seen by the coppers. Your father's anger stems from fear, the fire still burning in his mind. And Dad says he barely brakes in time to not send him flying ahead due to road trains having a much harder time braking than a car does. You see it in his eyes. A man unshaken by years on the road, now trembling at how close he came to another tragedy. They get pulled over, and my dad abused the hell out of this guy because he was still upset about the night before, and he sure as hell didn't want to see that again. The road trains, giants hauling multiple trailers, can't stop like cars. A lesson etched in flame. The road scars you, and you carry its warning. And the guy acted like he had no idea what he did. You listen, chilled by your father's fear, a rare crack in his strength. I have never seen my dad afraid. You search online, finding forums, truckers sharing tales of reckless drivers, wrecks, and guilt that lingers. But I could see in his eyes how scared he was when he told me this, because that moment terrified him so much that he could have been the guy who had taken another man's life so quickly. A local driver mentions Queensland's highways, notorious for impatient cars, no answers for the pain. I hope that people can understand that trucks, especially road trains, don't have the same capability as cars. You dig into road train specs, massive rigs, 3 or 4 trailers, unstoppable forces, needing space and time. You should know how to act around them and how they work. You write a blog urging caution around trucks, your father's story a plea. And for anyone wondering what a road train is, imagine an old-looking, generally all-round, gargantuan-sized semi, hauling 3, sometimes 4 normal-sized trailers at the same time. Replies come. Drivers, families, touched by near misses, fires, losses, hauling that much stuff. You live far from highways now, but avoid tailgating, respect rigs. Of course, it's not going to be able to stop as fast as your 1994 Honda Civic. The fire, the screams, your father's fear, they stay. A warning to drive with care, lest the road claim another. Story number 22, the lift, driver's rage. The city streets were my battlefield. Each day, a test of survival. I was 26, navigating a world of crowded buses and bold strangers, carving out my own space. A Lyft driver's rage turned a rainy ride into a nightmare, his eyes burning with hate. Stranded in the downpour, I faced his fury alone. This is the story of a ride that never happened and the strangers who held me up. The rain was relentless, soaking my dreams of a new apartment. I'd just secured my future with a deposit. But the journey home loomed long and wet. A lift seemed like salvation until the driver's scowl met my request. His anger was a storm of its own, threatening to swallow me whole. I stood my ground, but fear whispered I'd pushed too far. I'm a 6-year-old female living in a big city. I brave public transit daily, dodging unwanted attentions. I work every day, even during the pandemic, and take public transportation to work. After placing my deposit, rain forced my hand. I put a deposit down on my own apartment. It started pouring. I called a lift, tired and exposed. I decided to call a lift. He arrived, unmasked, glaring. My driver gets there, pulls up, and is motioning for me to get in. I asked for safety, but found rage. I notice he isn't wearing a face mask. I spoke calmly. I say, "Oh, hi, I'll just wait for you to put your mask on." His response was venom. He then comes out with, "What the hell it looks like in my hand." His eyes held murder, a stranger's hate so raw I froze. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like this from a stranger, just pure anger. He mocked my caution, then fled. He then said, "Do you think I need you to tell me to put it on?" I stood firm, shaken. No, I'm just waiting," I replied. He sped off, cursing, leaving me in the rain. He then gave me a look again and sped off, not before calling me a very few choice swear words. I reported him. I reported him to Lyft. Strangers became my shield. The best part of the story is the strangers that backed me up. A woman spoke out. 2 men stayed with me. One woman said that she saw what was going on and that it was messed up. And the 2 older men who waited with me while I cried, their kindness mended what he broke. Not everyone's that bad, but the crappy ones are truly the worst. His rage haunts me, a shadow of what might follow. My mom brought up an interesting point, as that since I probably got this guy fired, he's going to have even more violent rage. Story number 23, The Creep in the Aisle. The Walmart was a maze of fluorescent lights, its aisles buzzing with the hum of shoppers. I trailed behind Gran, our cart rattling. When I felt it, a prickle on my neck, a sense of eyes watching. A man, scruffy and tall, lingered at the end of the aisle, his gaze too sharp, too fixed on me. I shook it off. The store too crowded, too normal for fear. But he was there again, in the next aisle, his boots scuffing the floor, his shadow too close. Gran chatted, oblivious, but my heart quickened. The air growing thick, like the store itself was closing in, hiding him in plain sight. We moved to the clothing section, the racks a jumble of colors, but he followed. His presence a weight I couldn't ignore. I glanced back, catching his eyes, dark, unblinking, a hunter's stare. The store wasn't safe anymore. It was his territory, and I was trapped in it. I stayed close to Gran, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. He was always there, just out of reach, his steps matching mine, his silence louder than the crowd. I wanted to scream, to run, but where could I go in this labyrinth of shelves with a predator who knew every turn? This wasn't a shopping trip. It was a chase, a game I hadn't chosen, with rules I didn't know. The man, the store, the light, they were all against me. And I was alone, A girl in a place too big, too bright, with a darkness that breathed too close. I was in Walmart with my gran. We were walking around and shopping for stuff. Your normal Saturday morning errand run. The store was familiar, its aisles packed with deals, its hum a comfort. While walking around, I had begun to notice an older man in his late 30s, early 40s, kind of scruffy clothing that looked like he'd been working in a few of the same aisles as my gran. I thought nothing of it, since it's Walmart and it's not that big of a store. His jeans were worn, his jacket stained, but he blended in, just another shopper, or so I thought. At one point, my grandma asked me if I need new bras. For those of you who don't know, Walmart sells $3.98 bras, and they're awesome. I told her, yeah, sure. And we went to the ladies' underwear section of the store. My grandma went to look at bras, and I went to see if they had any matching underwear when I noticed the man again. He was there, near the socks. His head turned slightly, watching. I walked down to the sock aisle and didn't see him. So, I slowly made my way back to where the thongs and stuff were. I was minding my own business when I heard someone walk behind me. I figured it was my gram. So, I partially turned to ask how many pairs I could get, but she wasn't behind me. I looked around and see the guy at the end of the aisle. Whatever. Maybe he has a wife or girlfriend, and I went back into my little world looking for underwear. My stomach twisted, the store's noise fading, his presence a shadow I couldn't shake. Gran was nearby, but too far, her voice lost in the racks. He was closer now, too close, and the aisle wasn't just shelves, it was a trap, with him at its heart. I looked for another minute or so when I felt a presence behind me. I looked to my left and saw a little bit of my grandma, who was obscured by the rack looking at nightgowns. I decided to stare straight ahead, since maybe someone taller than me was just looking at underwear that was over my head and felt some kind of press against me. Then I heard breathing. It was heavy, pleasure breathing, like someone was just calming down after finishing. My blood froze, my body rigid, the sound of violation, raw and wrong. I turned on my heels to see this guy who had been following me with his hands down his pants, obviously fondling himself. His face was blank, his eyes empty. His act a horror I couldn't unsee. I literally screamed, "Nanny!" And the guy sprinted away. My voice echoed, heads turning, Gran rushing over, her face pale as I stammered out what happened. I told Walmart security, and they told me they had no authority to do anything about it. Their words were a slap, their shrugs a dismissal, leaving me shaking. Gran's arm around me. I just can't get that sound of his breathing out of my head. It followed me home, into my dreams, a rasp that woke me at night, a reminder of the man, the aisle, the moment I wasn't safe. The days after were heavy, my steps cautious, my eyes scanning every crowd. Gran stayed close, her chatter forced, her worry a mirror of mine. We avoided Walmart, shopped online, but the fear stayed, a stain I couldn't wash out. I told Mom, her face tightening, her calls to the store ignored, security cameras caught nothing clear. His face a blur, his crime a ghost in the footage. I started carrying a whistle, its shrill promise a small shield. I read about creeps, about public spaces turned predatory, each story an echo of that aisle, that breath. One night, I found a scratch on my window, faint but real, and I wondered, was it him or just the wind? I didn't know, but I locked my door, checked it twice. The sound of his breathing a chain I'd carry, a lesson in how safe was never sure.